Yes.
Yeah? Okay. Richard? Peter? All right. Good evening. Welcome to the Tuesday, February 4th meeting of the Brattleboro Selectboard. John, was this meeting properly warned?
Yes, Daniel, it was.
Wonderful. Thank you. Our first order of business is to approve minutes from January 21st and January 28th. Can I get a motion? Franz?
Daniel, I move that the minutes be approved as submitted.
Okay. Franz has made a motion to approve the minutes as submitted. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes for January 21st and 28th as submitted, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that passes 5-0. Next up is Chair's remarks. I missed the last meeting, and I appreciate my colleague Elizabeth for doing what the Vice Chair is supposed to do and stepping in and chairing the meeting. I heard it was a swift one, and I'm sure that was all you're doing. So thank you.
And I'm glad you're feeling better.
Yeah, I am feeling better, thank you. Not 100%, but close to it. So a couple of things I wanted to say this evening. First up, actually, kind of like following on from our last meeting, I heard that the board made a change to the warning where they had an advisory article that was multiple choice, which is novel in the world of town government warnings, as far as I'm aware, or at least in Brattleboro. And I'm curious to see how it goes, and I think that it's a model that might be useful for future advisory questions. So that's interesting. Secondly, I wanted to talk about participation in our upcoming select board election and the representative town meeting election, which will happen on March 4th, right? And so it's really exciting to see so many people wanting to run for town meeting. It hasn't happened during the time that I've been participating in that meeting. We have, I would say, at least more than double the number of candidates for seats in most races, and sometimes even more than that. And so that's really, really great. And then it kind of poses a challenge in a way, because now it's like, how do we know who those people are that are running? And so I'll encourage folks who are running for representative town meeting to get the word out about their candidacy and convince others why they should vote for them to represent their neighbors at representative town meeting. I wonder if the town has a role to play as a host of like some sort of voter's guide in a very neutral way, just simply like, a place on the website. And maybe, John, that's something we could talk about another day. But I think it's really wonderful to see so much participation in our elections. And we have really good races for select board as well. And I believe there's going to be a forum next Wednesday at the Reformer office on Landmark Hill Drive. Good, I'm seeing nods. From 5 to 7, 5:30 to 7. If you showed up at 5, you're not going to be, missing too much. So that's great. And because we have these really wonderful contested races, again, I would say it's incumbent on those that are running for office to get word out about themselves and give the voters some information so folks can make an informed decision. And then finally, I just want to make my kind of usual comments about participation in this meeting. So it's really great to have an engaged group of people here. And I will remind folks that in order to participate, all you simply need to do is raise your hand. If you're on Zoom, raise your Zoom hand, and I will recognize you. I'll say, hey, it's this person next. And at that point, you just introduce yourself, say your name, where you live, and you can have up to 3 minutes to speak on the matter at hand. Or if you're looking to speak during public participation, it can be about anything that's not on tonight's agenda. And, I would just ask that folks keep the spirit cordial and not interrupt one another, not yell out, not exclaim, not applaud, not boo. and just keep it so that we have a meeting that everyone can participate in equally. And with that, I shall close and pass it on to John for manager's comments.
Thank you, Daniel. A few things to mention tonight. The Department of Public Works will be doing snow removal tonight. That will be dedicated to the downtown area. Given the significant snowstorms that are forecasted for Thursday night and over the weekend, DPW crews are asking for your patience and understanding as they work to ensure the safety of everyone traveling in town. The department will be actively monitoring weather conditions and implementing the most effective strategies for removing built-up snow throughout town in the coming days, and people's cooperation and understanding are greatly appreciated. Businesses in Brattleboro are required to get a business license again this year. They will need to either use the account that they created last year to renew or create a new account if they have not done so already by going to brattleboro.gov under licenses and permits. The fee for a business license is $50. The license must be obtained by March 15th to avoid any additional fees. Starting yesterday, the town clerk's office is closed to the public for the lunch hour from 12 to 1 p.m. daily. So be prepared for that if you're looking for the town clerk. One of the reasons you may be looking for the town clerk is that you can now request absentee ballots for the March 4th election. You can do that on my voter page or by visiting the town clerk's office. Ballots will be mailed on or about February 12th. In-person early voting will likely begin at some point during the week of February 18th once the town clerk has checked out the machines, the voting tabulators, and an announcement will go out as soon as they know when that is and when they are available. Also, the town clerk has asked me to remind everybody that dog owners should have received renewal notices for their dog licenses in the mail. If you encounter difficulties renewing online, please contact the town clerk. Finally, I want to remind everyone that the Charter Revision Commission is inviting the community to discuss the form of Brattleboro's annual town meeting. Join them on Thursday, February 6th from 6 to 8 p.m. at Brooks Memorial Library. This event will also be broadcast live on BCTV channel 1079 and on BCTV's website. More details are available on the town's website at brattleboro.gov.
Great. Thanks, John.
You're welcome.
Okay, next up, select board comments and or committee reports. Elizabeth?
Yes, thank you, Daniel. I just noticed it's Black History Month. It's always great to celebrate Black history. Black history is American history. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Other board members? Franz?
Thank you, Daniel. Apparently it's become fashionable in town to have meetings on Wednesday, sort of late in the afternoon or early evening. And so for the next 2 Wednesdays, there are meetings that are interfering with my office hours. So if you come to talk to me on Wednesday at the Works, I will be there from 4:30 till 5:30 tomorrow and 4:30 till 5:30 the week after. But after that, I'll have to go do something else. So just to give you a heads up, if you do want to come and see me, come early. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Franz. Anyone else? No. Okay, so next up, Peter?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand.
So I just wanted to address something that had come up a few meetings ago that has been sort of bothering me, especially after previous statements made by the same individual, and I'm talking about Dick DeGray. And the comments he made as John tried to explain how the budget impacts the town and the community at large, and laid it out in plain and simple terms, only to be met with some polarizing language of the sky is falling, everybody must have risked their lives to get here. After having many conversations with Dick in prior months about our downtown safety issues, how things needed to be corrected. And then the previous meeting, the part that's bothering me the most is that the meeting directly before that, he stood at that microphone and made a speech, which I thought took some merit, about how he wasn't really enjoying this sort of divisive tone that is overfalling this town, and then proceeded the very next meeting with that sort of rhetoric. So I would just be remiss if I didn't bring that up. It has been bothering me. I had a whole statement all ready to go and printed out, but I just decided just to do this, keep it simple, and I wanted to do it on a night when Dick was here so that he could hear it first face to face. So that's all.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Next up is public participation, and this is a part of the meeting where a person could speak on something that is not on tonight's agenda. And if you, during this time, you could also request that something be pulled from our consent agenda. If you would like to speak during this part of the meeting, simply raise your hand and I will recognize you, and you may have up to 3 minutes on the topic that is not on tonight's agenda. Would anybody like to speak? Amanda.
Amanda Ellis Thurber, Brattleboro. I prepared a remark.
Okay.
Congratulations to all select board candidates and candidates for representative town meeting. My hope is that our campaigns as we lead up to the election will be cordial, respectful, meaningful, and that we never lose sight of the fact that Brattleboro is and has always been a respectful and caring community, regardless of politics. And I want to also give a shout out on Thursday night, Downtown Brattleboro Alliance Love Crawl. I'm going to go for the first time because I'm running for select board to meet a lot of y'all. But it's going to be great. Snow, I don't know if it'll interrupt it, but maybe someone will comment on Zoom. Anyway, thanks.
Great, thank you. No bad weather, only bad clothing. Right? Yeah. Anybody else like to speak? Mr. DeGray.
Yeah, Dick DeGray, District 8. A couple things. When is the audit going to be on the agenda?
On our next meeting.
At your next meeting?
Yeah.
No one thought it was important to put on this meeting, I guess.
I can speak to that in a second, but go ahead with your other comments.
I would agree with you about the select board and all the races for town meeting rep. I hope it's not an anomaly of 1 year, okay, we're going to do this. I'm really disappointed about the rhetoric in terms of more conversation about the human service budget than there is about the budget that's up 12.5%. And as for my comments from a couple of weeks ago, those are the analogies that I used. If they offended some, I'm not going to apologize for what I said. I get to say what I want to say, and you get to respond. If it bothered anybody, I'm not hard to find, that's for sure. You could have called me. And feel free to write any letter that you ever want to do about me, about anything that I say. I'm going to continue to come to these meetings and say what I want to say and how I feel, because I think I represent a lot of people in this community. It may ruffle a few feathers, but that's just the way it is. When I sat where you sat, people ruffled my feathers, and I sat there and I took it because it's part of what being up there is all about. People get to say things. It may irk you, but that's their right to say it. I may not like it, but I took it. So, having said that, I'm easy to find. Just call me up and we can have a face-to-face with anybody.
Thanks. Other people who would like to speak on something that is not on tonight's agenda? Patrick, I don't see the participant list. Is that going to pop up at some point?
Well, Zoom has introduced some new features, and one of them is when this white bar that shows the participants come up, it blocks the it used to adjust the size
That
of
seems like a less
the
good
pictures,
feature.
but now
Yeah.
it chooses not to.
Anti-feature.
So I've been sort of keeping it off.
Got it.
And if somebody's raising their hand, I'll still know, but
Okay, thank you.
if you'd like me to keep it on.
No,
I'll
that's
put it
fine.
back.
That's fine. Yeah. I might need reminding sometimes. And so the audit. So last meeting that I was at, so not the last meeting, but the one before that, we had a couple of requests from folks to have the audit be part of this meeting. And you might remember that I hedged a lot about whether we would do that. And it wasn't because I was just being evasive. We knew that the town was trying to work with the auditor to get a meeting with her to discuss the audit. And we knew that at that time it wasn't resolved. And so I was committed to us having the audit be part of a future agenda, but I did not want to say which meeting because I didn't want to overpromise and underdeliver. And so we have scheduled some meetings with the auditor. John, if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, I can update a little bit on that. So we've been trying to get a meeting with the auditor just so that we understood everything that's in there and her findings, and so that we could talk as intelligently as possible, not being experts in the finance world. So we're meeting with her on Thursday, and we hope to be able to ask her the questions that we had about how she did things in there. And we can maybe under the finance department item tonight shed some light on stuff that we already know if the board wants us to do that. But basically, we can do a more full report at your February 18th meeting.
Great, thank you. Okay, very good. Kate?
Kate O'Connor, Brattleboro. Just to follow up on that, would there be any reason that the auditor couldn't come to the select board meeting? I just say that because if you folks have to talk to the auditor because you're not sure about finances, maybe just have her come and explain stuff to the entire town.
Okay.
We have to see what it
Other members who would like to speak? Helen?
Hi, Helena.
Yeah,
Leschuk.
I never know if it's Helena or Helena.
Thank you.
Helena,
I'm
sorry.
the ops manager at BCTV, but also a Brattleboro resident. I just wanted to go back to what you said about the debate. It is a debate next Wednesday. Sorry, I'm trying to keep it all straight in my head here. We will be there live streaming that. It is from 5:30 to 7:30. It'll be on Comcast Channel 1079 or go to brattleboro.tv. All live streamed. And then in a couple weeks, on the 25th, is another Brattleboro Selectboard forum. This is more of a forum, not a debate. We are also live streaming that. That'll be from our studio upstairs. Really excited to have everyone do this from our studio. There will also be a WSESD school board candidate forum on Thursday, the 27th. All of these are being live streamed. So I just wanted to make our citizens aware that you can still stay informed even if you are at home. We're also live streaming this Thursday's Brattleboro Charter Revision Commission. Very important information discussion. So please tune in. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Other members of the public who would like to speak about something that's not on tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. John, would you give us a brief summary of what's on it tonight?
Sure will, Daniel. There's 7 items on the consent agenda tonight. If you approve this agenda, you'll be authorizing staff to apply for an up to $200,000 downtown transportation grant to support design and construction improvements on Bridge Street. You'll be approving a parade permit for Windham County Humane Society's Walk for Animals to be held on September 13th. You'll be approving the annual certificate of highway miles to VTrans required to qualify for state highway funding. You'll be accepting and appropriating 3 highway grants from the state, $20,080 from DEC for a Better Roads road erosion inventory grant, $120,000 from VTrans for paving of Class 2 town highways, and $200,000 from VTrans for replacement construction of 2 structures on Ackley Road. Finally, if you approve this consent agenda, you'll be approving a limited event permit for Winston Prouty's annual bingo fundraiser scheduled for March 20th.
Great, thanks, John. Board members wish to pull any of those items for discussion at the end of today's agenda? No? Okay, I'll accept a motion then. Peter?
I'll motion that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Okay, Peter's made a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. That passes 5-0. We're going to move on to new business. Our first item of new business is a kickoff meeting for the utility rate study. And we have with us tonight Mike and Nick from New Gen Strategies and Solutions, and Dan Tyler, our DPW Director. And so, folks, I'd invite you to kick things off.
Yeah, so about a month ago, we awarded the contract for the utility rate study to New Gen Solutions, Strategies and Solutions. Since then, they provided us with a data request. We've been working through that. We've kind of had an internal kickoff meeting with them to look at some preliminary stuff, just kind of clarify some of the information they need. And they're here tonight. We've got Mike and Nick. They're going to present to us kind of Rates 101 and how the process works and answer any questions that folks might have.
Great. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thanks
It's
for
all
having
yours.
us. So we have a brief presentation. If you have questions during it, feel free to stop us, or unless you want to wait to the end, it's fine. I think Patrick's going to try to pull it up on the screen at the same time, so you want to follow along there.
Not this one.
Not that one.
Wrong one.
Wrong one.
You can't do that one.
I don't know. I know enough about fire to be dangerous. Leave that up.
Got to have water for the fire.
That's true. That's right. We've learned that recently. Yes.
All right, hold on just a second.
You can switch roles. You want to? Okay, great.
All right. Thanks.
There we go.
So I'm Mike Maker. I'm a partner with the firm. We're in our Annapolis, Maryland office. I did grow up in Boston area though, so I know New England well. Brief presentation. We're going to go to the next slide here. Our agenda. 4 topics. So I'm going to cover some of the challenges facing water and sewer utilities, kind of a state of the industry, and then I'll talk a little bit about principles of rate setting, water and sewer rate setting. And then Nick will talk about rate design, looking at fixed versus variable charges, how you want to go about charging customers. And then just briefly, like Dan said, we're really in the preliminary stages, so we don't have any findings for you tonight for your own situation, but we can show you at least what your rate structure looks like right now, how you compare to some surrounding area utility bills and things like that. So next slide. So state of the industry. So in the water industry, there's one major trade group. It's called American Water Works Association, AWWA. There's also a sewer one for Water Environment Federation, handles the wastewater side. But AWWA puts out this State of the Water Industry report every year. So their latest one is from last year, 2024. And what they do is they survey all the members of the trade group and they ask, what are your most important issues? So there's like a list of 15. These are the top 3 in 2024. So watershed, source water protection. I think we're finding, water is a very valuable resource. We want to protect that source and make sure that we have clean drinking water. So that was actually number 1 last year. So in terms of increasing system resilience, so making sure that we have safe and reliable, protecting that from any ill will or cyber attacks, things like that. We want to make sure we have clean access water. So protecting those water supplies. The second one, finance for capital improvements. This has been on the top 3 for the past 10 years. As you know, water and sewer assets are very capital intensive. It's usually one of your most expensive assets for any municipality. And we found, state, federal regulations, they don't seem to be getting less strict. At least they didn't used to be. Maybe not this administration, but. So EPA, the Clean Water Act is CWA, and then the Safe Drinking Water Act. Those are all federal programs that protect water and wastewater. State programs in Vermont, so those regulators in Vermont is Department of Environmental Conservation. If you were an investor-owned utility, so if you weren't municipal, you'd be regulated by the Public Utilities Commission. There's also the Department of Health is obviously important in regulations. And then that last one I think is drinking water and groundwater protection district or division. So those are kind of the main regulatory bodies. So those are where we follow or what we need to do in terms of capital projects. Some of the things you might have heard of recently is things like PFAS. So that's like these forever chemicals, they're microplastics and things like that. It leaches from all sorts of, shampoo bottles, flame retardant, all sorts of things, and it ends up in our water sources. So the EPA has passed some rules there where you're going to have to monitor and then sample and make sure we can get those things out of our water sources. Lead pipes is another big one. You've probably seen some of this. The goal is to get rid of all lead pipes across the country. So it's an ambitious goal, but it's certainly important. But these things are expensive, so there's pressure on rates and affordability. So we're finding that, because of all this capital intensive projects, the customers are going to have to pay for it one way or another. So ideally, we can get it through grants if they're available. That would be the best way. But if not, we look at things like debt funding and things like that. So the last one is also kind of been on the top 10 the past several years, the top 3. That's renewal replacement of aging water infrastructure. So we've got all these mains and pipes underground. A lot of customers don't know they exist. They don't really know the extent of what the assets are like. 'Cause it's buried assets. You don't even see them until a water main breaks and there's water gushing out of the ground. And then we know we have an issue. A lot of the pipes, especially on the East Coast, over 70, 80, 100 years old. So making sure we have a plan to help pay for those and replace those assets. And then it's hard to read on the bottom there, but I'm sorry, yeah. S&P, Standard & Poor's, they put out an outlook as well as a bond agency. Some of the things they talk about, I'm going to have to look at this one here. Come with the same stuff, so regulations, expense pressure, so how that affects expenses, rate affordability, how can customers afford these things. Weather, climate change is certainly a factor. You're starting to see stormwater as being an issue. So, as the water goes off roofs and impervious areas and goes into our waterways, it brings, litter and oil and things like that. So making sure we can protect that. Labor shortage we're seeing in the water and sewer utility is certainly an issue. We have this tsunami of retirements as the population is aging. So trying to get that workforce replenished, and then just risk planning and things like that. So, yes, Patrick, next. So I mentioned the pressure on rates and affordability. So what this chart shows, this table here, is I've compared the median household income, the CPI, and then there's a portion of the CPI for water and sewer costs. So median household income essentially being our ability to pay for things, how much that has increased over the past 20 years. CPI being the general cost of goods, inflation. So you can see here the green being the MHI, the red being the CPI. They've about kept in line with each other. But then when we introduce the portion of that CPI, that basket of goods that's related to water and sewer costs, you can see that's outpaced the general CPI, and it's outpaced our ability to pay for those costs.
So that's median household income in Brattleboro, in Vermont?
It's
or
national. This is national numbers. Yeah, so if you see the bullets at the bottom, so MHI has increased about 2.5% per year. Inflation, general inflation has been about 2.5% per year. I know in recent past we've seen all the way up to 8%, but it's kind of come back down. And then water and sewer costs is roughly double that. So we're seeing nationwide, rates are on the rise and having to pay for all this infrastructure. Next slide. So some of the basic principles of water sewer rate setting. So ideally, water and sewer systems should be self-sufficient. As enterprise funds, they should really be run as a business. They should not be subsidized by the general fund. They can certainly pay the general fund for services they receive. So if they receive finance or IT or legal services, they should certainly pay for those services. But in the general purposes, they should not really be used as a cash cow to help keep taxes down or something like that. And typically customers pay for these services based on usage or demand. So it's either like 1,000 gallons or 100 cubic feet is kind of the way they're paid for. The objective here is to keep rates and fees low over time, but we stress the over time there because we can, not not invest in our system, defer maintenance, but then eventually something's going to blow up and we're going to have to do a really big increase or run out and get emergency loans. So we try to do is, gradual, smooth rate increases by putting together financial plans. And not just looking 1 year at a time, but a 5-year plan, which I know you adopted last time you did a 5-year plan. And certainly part of that will be the requirement of reserves. So we recommend really two reserves, an operating reserve and a capital reserve. So kind of like a rainy day fund you'd have with your checking or savings account, and then another reserve to handle, if there is a main break, do we have money to help pay for that? Now, in the end, someone must pay, as you know. Most operating capital costs are fixed. Other than chemicals and electricity, pretty much all your costs are fixed. You still have salaries, you still have benefits, you still have debt service you need to pay. But we can't just go ahead and, put all the costs into a fixed charge, because then if you're a low user, there's no real way to conserve or save money if you just put it all in the fixed charge. So there's a balance there between fixed and variable, and Nick will get into some of that. Then discounts, rebates. So if any one customer class receives a discount or a lower bill, then that means another customer class is going to see a higher one, just so it all balances. Next slide. So what this schematic shows, so what we're going to build you is a financial model in Excel, and this actually is our table of contents. And every one of these boxes is a schedule in the model. So you'll be able to click on it, it'll bring you to that schedule, and then you can go back and kind of see what the needs are. But this also kind of shows a schematic of how the rate study is performed. So I know it's hard to read, but that first box, it says assumptions. That's things like inflation. What are we going to apply for increase in costs? What are we looking at for growth in customers, growth in usage, if any? What are we looking at for metrics on reserves, minimum reserves? All those blue boxes are the cost of the system. So things like operating maintenance expenses, that's your salaries and benefits, your day-to-day costs. We've got your current debt, so any principal and interest payments you're currently paying. Your CIP, so that's your capital plan. What are we going to do for the next 5 to 10 years? And then how are we going to fund those? So we're going to debt fund it. We then calculate the new debt. So your total debt picture will be anything you're paying now in debt plus your new debt. Then we talked about that capital reserve. So we add up all the costs, all the blue, and that's what we call the revenue requirement. That's the revenue required to be collected from customers. We left out any miscellaneous revenues, so anything that's not rates and charges. So if you're collecting penalties or interest or any other sales or services of miscellaneous items, that helps lower what you need to collect from customers. We look at a snapshot of your customers and usage, detailed usage analysis, and then in simple terms, it's A divided by B gives you the rate. So the cost divided by the usage gives you what you need to charge customers. And then we always say customers don't really care what their rate is. They want to know what their bill is going to be. So then we look at, okay, what's a sample bill for a typical small customer, typical medium size, a large customer, maybe some commercial customers. We'll look at your top 10, 20 commercial customers. How would their bill be affected? And then we compare it to some surrounding utilities. So it's not always an apples to apples when you compare to other utilities because everybody's system is different. But I know elected officials are always interested in seeing how do we compare. So next slide. And then again, this is just the building blocks of those costs I mentioned, the revenue requirement. So at the bottom, again, is your base costs, your O&M expenses, salaries, benefits, materials, supplies. Add on your current debt service until that's exhausted. Any cash funding capital projects. So if it's a routine capital project, you're doing it year over year, you probably don't want to debt fund that. You want to save that more for large, lumpy projects. Any new debt service from those projects, and then reserves. So add all that up, and that's our revenue requirement. And now I'm going to let Nick talk about rates.
Thank you, Mike. Good evening, everyone, select board members. My name is Nick Short. I'm a senior consultant in our Annapolis office. I work alongside Mike. We've been working on the Brattleboro water and sewer rate study. I'm going to speak a little bit now to the rate design aspect of everything. Mike talked a little bit about the current standing of the water and sewer industry. But we're going to talk a little bit now about the rate design. And so the very first thing it says up there is our rate design is largely influenced by policy objectives of the utility. So for every single rate design that we work on, every single one is different. The policy objectives are going to be different. So with that, it's a bit of a balancing act to make sure that we're trying to make sure everything is fair, but we're also trying to collect revenues properly and equitable. So for our first example, revenue stability versus affordability, we want to make sure that we're bringing in at least a stable amount of revenue that we know and we can count on, as well as making sure that we're also not just forcing everything into fixed charges to bring in fixed revenue, because as Mike mentioned earlier, that's going to force our affordability way up. It's going to force people not to be able to afford the current water they use, as well as it's going to discourage conservancy as well if there's no additional costs for the rising amount of water usage. Again, encouraging use versus discouraging use, the balancing act between that. Your existing service area that you're currently working with, as well as building out. So if you're a rapidly growing or expanding town or utility, balancing those two service areas to make sure that, again, you're being equitable and fair to your current ones that you're representing, as well as to your new constituents. Moving on. So I kind of briefly touched on that a little bit, but for the rate design, it can be broken out into fixed versus variable costs. So starting with fixed costs, they do not typically vary with water sales. So again, consumption-wise, they're not really tied to that. They're more so salaries, debt service, et cetera, costs that you know are going to be already incurred. And typically that ends up being about 80% or the majority of the cost of that utility. Comparatively speaking to variable costs, which again vary with the water sales, as they can go up, they can go down year over year, as well as the costs related to that because of the power and chemical supplies that you might need to purchase to actually apply to that water. And again, typically a smaller amount, a portion of cost. So what we've been seeing is a trend of long-term water usage has been declining. So we've been trying, and we've been seeing a larger, increase in policies to try and recover more of that cost through fixed charges and through fixed revenues. Next slide. And so with that, there's a variety of different charges that come about. So you have a billing charge or a customer charge. And so really the cost basis behind that is it's just the cost of operating, metering, and sending out and billing the actual physical bill. There isn't any meter size that goes into it or anything. It's just per customer, per bill. Comparatively speaking to a service or meter charge, which you guys utilize, the cost basis for that, the costs that vary with the meter size. So if you're a small resident that has a 5/8 inch meter, you'll be paying less than a larger commercial customer with a 4-inch meter, simply because they have the ability to pull more water out of the system at a much higher rate. And then finally, as well, you have a minimum charge. And a minimum charge, it can be classified a few different ways, but typically it's just a small portion of the usage, typically that occurs within a residential customer. And you have like a lifeline rate or a smaller amount of a charge associated with that. And then anything after that can be applied as a unit rate or just a variable rate after that cost. Some advantages and disadvantages, it's going to be a recurring theme. The higher the fixed charge, the greater the revenue stability, the more money that you guys will know will be coming in. However, the higher it is, the more expensive the service is for the smaller users, the low-income users, and elderly as well. Next slide, please. So with that being said, with the rate design, we're kind of switching gears now to talk more about the variable side of everything, variable rates. The very first one we're going to start off and talk about is just a uniform unit rate one. I believe that's what Brattleboro uses. It's just after that initial base fee that you guys have the quarterly, everything is just charged one flat rate. I think it's like $296 for water, and then I think $684 for sewer. You can also implement an inclining block or inclining rate design, and that'll just encourage a little bit more conservancy. So the higher the usage goes up, you're stepping into that next tier, you're paying a little bit more to have that privilege of spending and using that water. If you're a smaller town, if you have larger industrial customers, sometimes you'll see a declining block, and that's trying to encourage the industrial customers, potentially encouraging a larger use for whatever reason. Maybe you just have a larger access to water. That's when you'll see that type of rate design. And then you have a seasonal or peak usage, which is typically basing the usage of the customer in the winter or summer, and then applying that into the summer or peak usage season to try and recoup some of those extra costs for it being a premium, either premium weather, premium usage of that water. Next slide, please. So some factors and assumptions that are currently affecting Brattleboro. we're operating under the assumption of 3% escalation fees and charge, or escalation rates, excuse me. So for any operating and maintenance related expense charges, we're just every year annually we're increasing that by 3%. For the capital improvement plan, investing in the treatment, distribution, and collection systems of the actual utility. Your current debt service that you have, your existing and future debt service, I believe you have two or three that run out to, I think, 2043 and 2053. So a few long debt service items. We haven't really seen too much customer growth or water usage decline or growth for that matter. And then miscellaneous revenue charges, currently at 0% increase per year, just to be more conservative. And then finally, a reserve targets of 90 days or 25% of operating expenses. And I believe you guys do this a little bit differently, but you do have some sort of capital reserve fund where you're having cash and it's rolling over year. So you guys already have that established as well. Next slide, please. So these are your current rates and charges. I believe that you guys are aware of these already, but just for anyone that isn't, your quarterly base fees are established for water and sewer, and they change again based off the meter size. So if you're a 5-inch customer, you'll be paying differently than an 8-inch customer. Clearly, you can see that. The quarterly usage rate, as I mentioned before, is a unit rate, and you also have a quarterly unmetered use charge for single tenement or trailers down below on the left-hand side. We're also taking a look and analyzing your fire line charges as well as any miscellaneous fees that you guys have. So your annual fire line charges are in the middle. You'll see different connection sizes from 2 to 8 inches and additional hydrant charges as well. And then on the right-hand side, you have any miscellaneous fees, and they can differ from water and sewer. And then on the bottom, you also have connection charges, $1,000 each for water and sewer. Next slide, please. And so this is your current combined local quarterly bill comparison. This is how you stack up to a few other utilities in the region. But this is, it currently says 9,000 gallons of usage. We converted that into a more recent one that we have just a few minutes ago. But this is just says in gallons of usage to make it a little bit more simple. However, you guys do it in 100 cubic feet. I believe that calculates to like 1,200 cubic feet of water, 1,203, I believe. But that just shows that where you guys currently sit. The blue is for water and the green is for sewer. And I believe that total there says around $178. So you're currently sitting just around the, I would say, middle of the pack, which is healthy. But.
Thanks, Dick.
Yep.
So next steps. So when the town issued a request for proposals, they had some key dates and meetings they wanted to set up. So as Dan mentioned, we've already had the preliminary kickoff. We did that over Teams. We met again with a status call, and then so today is the in-person select board kickoff meeting. And then typically what we'll do is we'll kind of alternate between having some Teams meetings and then an in-person. So I think we have 2 more in-person meetings planned with the select board to come bring our preliminary findings and then final recommendations. So the goal, I think, is to have everything done by April 15th is the last meeting. So with that, we will take any questions.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Select board, questions for the presenters? Elizabeth.
Thank you, Daniel. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
So what I'm hearing is this is not merely a rate study, but an overall assessment of the needs of the water and sewer system and future planning and financing. Is that correct?
So we're not engineers, so we will not be assessing what projects you need to do. That'll be more on the advice of staff or if you have an engineering consultant. But yes, financially, we're not just looking at the rates. We are looking at all the fees and miscellaneous charges and a financial plan. So actually the model will go out 10 years. Typically we recommend, if you can, set rates for 5 years and then revisit the model. It'll be your property for Patrick and Dan to work with. And they would go in, take your projected years, put the actuals. How did things change? Do we need to adjust, or does the 5-year plan still fit? So that's kind of the setup. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And I just want to commend Dan Tyler and John Potter for having this study, and it's evidence of the town's long-term planning.
Great, thank you. Other board members? Richard?
Does your study include any evaluation of the infrastructure of the systems?
No, it's going to be purely financial based, yeah. So it's going to be relying on your own data sources, other than if we use industrial or industry related sources. But like I said, we're not going to be doing condition assessments on your pipes or things like that. That's typically done by an engineer. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
And we've recently done that with the water system. We did a analysis of the water system recently. It's still actually in the works. We've recently completed our preliminary lead service line inventory, so a lot of that's reflected in that capital plan.
Thanks, Dan. Other board members?
But just follow up.
Yep.
So will that study inform
Yes.
this study?
Yeah. So any of the cost recommendations from that study will build into the financial plan. Yeah.
Great. Other board members? Franz?
Thank you, Daniel. Welcome.
Yes, thank you.
Imagine we'll be getting to know you more in the coming months. This is more an item of curiosity, I think, than anything else, but we just take your sewage, your sewer volume as your water volume. Just say if you took that out of the system, you must have put it back, which clearly is not always true. Do you have any thoughts, or in other systems, what kind of adjustments are sometimes made to that? I've heard there's a swimming pool adjustment, but I don't really know the details. And I just wonder, in general, as somebody who waters the lawn, I think, well, that's not going into the sewer system. But what's your approach to that?
There are a few different things you can do. Some may be a little more administratively burdensome than others. You could make it, if you have an irrigation system, you need to get a separate irrigation meter, and then they have to actually pay to install that. Or you could do something where summer wastewater usage is based on maybe like your winter usage. So there, or like a percentage above and beyond. So maybe there's a 25% above and beyond your winter usage cap to your sewer usage in the summer. So then that helps account for things like irrigation and swimming pool filling, things like that. It just requires, one of the things we ask for is all the detailed usage. So we'll have every account number, how much they use throughout the year, and we'll be kind of able to see those curves and see if that's something you were interested in, what the impact would be. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? Okay. Questions from the public? So just need to raise your hand and I'll recognize you. Yep, so if you'd come to the microphone, introduce yourself, and then if you ask your question to the board, to me, and I will bounce it around.
Great. Thank you. My name is Phil Giesler. I live on Marlborough Avenue, which is close to the high school. And I don't have a question, actually. I just have a statement or an opinion. Before I get into the specifics, I think what I heard was there's the potential for a rebalancing between the fixed and variable costs, and that sounds extremely welcome to me. I think that evaluation of that would be highly useful. I'm here to raise a specific point that I hope will be included in the review. Namely that once sewer and water services are connected, the base charges are incurred whether or not sewer and water service is desired. The base charges are currently, in my case, and I think for many others with single-family homes, are about $90 per month. And they're charged even for vacant lots, and even in the case of a building that has been burned to the ground, those charges continue. And that information comes from both the finance office and the Public Works Department. Charges that are imposed, even if they're not needed or wanted, are distinctive in comparison to other utility charges such as electric, cable TV, internet access, and of course other utility charges such as fuel, oil, and propane. So what I hope is that the evaluation that will be undertaken will also consider whether sewer and water services that are not wanted or needed can be terminated for a time by a property owner. That would align with the practices of other utilities to allow a termination of services when they're not necessary, and that seems like fair play to me. Thank you for your consideration, what you do for our community. I found Brattleboro to be just a top-rate town and really appreciate the caring and consideration from this board and all the town employees.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate it. Folks, any kind of reaction to that?
So I don't know exactly how you're doing it now. Some places do. If water line runs down the street, it typically increases the value of your home, just having that ability, that access to connect. Sometimes they will charge something, an availability charge for that. Other places, if maybe you're a snowbird and you go down to Florida for the summer, you can actually ask to have it turned off and pay a fee to turn it off, and pay a fee to turn it on. So I'm not sure exactly how you're doing it now, but there are some things you can do.
And is that kind of question sort of part of the study?
Yeah, we're certainly looking at financial policies and things like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Other members of the public with questions about this utility rate study? Okay. Seeing none, appreciate the presentation. We look forward to working with you, and we'll see you again in a little while.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much. Okay, so the next item is a quarterly update on the Downtown Safety Action Plan, and Chief Hardy and Assistant Chief Evans are going to present to us. Your point of order?
Not exactly. It's a point of I forgot.
Okay, well.
I would just ask if we could have some kind of a project page online to track all this, including the slideshow we saw.
I've made a note to do that already.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks so much. Good evening, welcome.
Good evening.
Thanks for coming.
Evening.
And so, Chief Hardy, you wrote us a memo, and I don't know if you'd like to speak to that memo or if you'd like to present in a different way.
Not really. I think more so from the memo. If anyone had questions about the memo, we're prepared to answer those questions. As far as our update for what's been going on with Brat, we're just happy to report. As far as Friday, we graduated members for the Brat team. We've hired 4 individuals that are now in training. 3 of them are in field training at this time. So they're going around with officers, getting to know the businesses and the area that they'll be tasked with patrolling, and spending a lot of time just out interacting with the businesses and the people that are in town, and showing them some of the little nooks and crannies that they may have to go in and just make sure people are safe, and going on some calls with the officers so they get used to that kind of interaction. So we're up and running with that, and we're hoping to have them fully trained as level 2s by the spring, because we expect that's when we'll start to see more people out and about. And we've been working on how to utilize them to get the most out of having those 4 individuals. So we're going to do 2 teams of 2 for a day shift and an evening shift, because we want to cover when the restaurants, the movie theater, and stuff like that gets closed.
Great, thank you. Board members, questions for Chief Hardy, Assistant Chief Evans? Franz, then Liz.
Okay, thank you. Welcome.
Come on.
It seems like you've used the Brat squad positions to kind of get people into the department, and then some of them go off to have just gone off to the academy to become level 3 officers.
Right.
Is that part of your long-term plan for these positions, or do you anticipate that it'll be a more stable crew, or that it'll be sort of a funnel into the higher level police officers?
Well, it could be that, but that was not the plan. Actually, we started out opposite of that. When we first started seeing that we needed people to be downtown and just be able to talk with the business and everything, we were bringing people in that we were waiting for them to go to the academy, and rather have someone, since there are only 2 academies a year, rather than having someone wait for 6 months to go to the academy, we started to utilize them, by putting them out into the community and doing this job. Being able to develop the plan, we just were able to fine-tune what we actually would be expecting from these individuals. And so that's what we've been doing. The three that you're talking about, they trained, everyone trained together, but they were already heading for that to go to the academy. But it was just everyone trained together because of a system that the assistant chief came up with to just help everybody start to train instead of waiting for us to call them in, waiting for a class to open up, waiting for to get a seat for them, waiting for us to get done with all the background investigations that we have to get done before we can hire someone. So it was a way to start to integrate people into being a part of the department.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, thanks, Dana. Hello, welcome.
Hello.
I noticed that people on the BRAT team are local, and I think that's great. I know one of the BRAT team members ran for select board a couple years ago, and it's all just very nice and community-minded, and I applaud you all for your work.
Thanks for, you know what, I actually forgot about that. Yeah, I heard that, but I really had forgotten about that.
Yeah, he's a nice guy.
Yeah, we're very happy that people from in the community have really, like, we had massive interest. We had so many people that came and put their applications in to join the BRAT team, particularly. And I'm very happy about the fact that we got young people from the community, that work in the community, so they know the downtown area. One of the young men that we hired actually worked at the co-op for quite some time, right? So he knows the area, so we're not just throwing people out that have never come in the downtown area in Brattleboro. We're also fortunate because we hired our community resource specialist first, which is Justin Johnston, who's been immense with everything. I mean, he just took off even before we hired the BRAT people. He's already, I talked to him yesterday, asked him for an update on what he's been up to. And since we hired him, I believe in October, he's had over 150 involvements with individuals. He's taken at least 30 people that he's followed up with after they've overdosed. And at least 10 of them he's convinced into going into treatment. And besides that, he's done numerous transports all over the state to take people to get treatments. So we've been really, really, really going above and beyond with that. And I actually just received 2 compliments this week from other agencies within the state about the program and about Justin.
That's great.
Yeah.
Nice.
Would you like to expand on those compliments?
Yes, one was from I'll just say from a larger city in Vermont that just wanted to know how we even came up with this model and this idea. And Justin has had to transport a person that had a bunch of support, but it was in this place that was 2 hours away. And so we were able to drive them there. And so I went to a meeting with all of the chiefs from the state, and it came up at the meeting, the program that we started here in Brattleboro. The other one was from another, town manager from a smaller town, I think made a statement to our one of our people that works here, and it got back to me that they thought that this was like really innovative, what we've started doing. So.
Great. Well, I think so too, and thank you.
Thank you. Richard?
Sounds like there's like a lot of moving pieces and a lot of different dates that are sort of have to come together eventually. And I'm wondering if you could give me a sense of, say, when the weather gets warmer, say June or July, what things, just sort of an overview, a quick sketch of how things are going to look in terms of the transportation center and the staffing, and just roughly.
Well, as far as the staffing, I can, the transportation center, I really can't speak on that, the progress. I would look to John Potter to speak on that as far as the progress for the substation. But I can speak on the staffing, the way we've been able to lay out our training and our training model And because some of the training we need comes from the state to be able to get to the level that we want our people trained in. So we've been able to spread that out so that we're looking that by the time the weather gets warm, which we feel will be a more robust downtown area, we will have all of our BRAT unit out and about and interacting with the public. And so their next stage now, they're in field training right now because they just graduated from Valor. So the BRAT people, they're out and about. If you're downtown, you'll see them walking around with the officers. So they're doing ride-alongs, and they're just constantly walking around interacting, and they're going into the businesses and talking to them. They're going to transportation center, offering resources and help to anyone that may need it or look like they may need resources or help. We're already doing that. Another thing that is very important with us is that when we will send the BRAT officers to the level 2 police academy. That's in March. So they will be going to training for 2 weeks to get even more in-depth training as far as the other little things that we'll be having them doing that we might not need a level 3 officer to do. So they'll be doing things like taking reports. Maybe if there's a theft in the past, they can do that. If we need to call them for traffic, they can do that. We actually had to utilize a couple of them for traffic that we just pulled them out of class the other day with the big snowstorm because people were driving off the roadways. And so things like that they'll be able to do. Escorts, that's a major one. We want to have that up and running, particularly when the weather gets nice. We've just had a meeting about that with my staff. That's a major one that we want to start as soon as possible, and then we'll do a campaign to let people know that we will be doing escorts. So if someone comes out of the movie theater late, comes out of a restaurant late, and maybe wants an escort for somebody to walk them to their car in the parking garage, we'll be offering that to the public.
How will that work in terms of, if I'm in a restaurant and I want somebody to be my escort, how do you have to do this in advance, or how are you going to order the service, so to speak?
Well, what's funny is that a lot of people don't even realize this, but if you look at the signs I put up like last summer, I believe, or summer before, there actually is a line on there that says if you feel that you need it. Like if you go by the transportation center, there was a sign that was by the elevator that gave you the number for dispatch if you felt like you needed an escort. And I think it just kind of went by the wayside. So what we plan on doing now is when we have the individuals to do it, we are going to do a complete campaign about it. We're going to put it on the website, the town website. We also are going to provide all of the businesses with the number, maybe because we've made magnets that we've been giving out to people, so it has our numbers right on it. And they can call up dispatch, or they can call up the BRAT unit supervisor directly and say, I'm getting out of the theater at 9 o'clock. I'd like somebody to come walk me to my car. So that's what we're working on right now, is fine-tuning how we get that message out to people and how people utilize that service.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Peter?
So I know what I'm hearing about the BRAT team, and it's all seems to be really good. I'm just wondering if you're hearing the same thing. Like any feedback that you have that you're getting about, is it being well received?
Absolutely. I was out this morning, and I was walking around Flat Street, and I went over to some of the businesses over there on Flat Street in where the Experience Goods and that area over there, and I talked to some of the people. I talked to the lady that runs the hair salon there, and she talked about that, how much of a difference she's seeing because they see what happens with the activity across the street in the parking garage on the other side where the stairways are. They don't see as much people loitering there or much activity. We still have activity, of course, because there's a lot of space down there, but we've been getting a lot of good feedback as far as people just seeing people around. They're introducing themselves and letting people know they're around. So I think with everything that we've put together with the plan itself and everything else that we're working on, I think that it's going to be a well-rounded and well-received totality of things that we're offering for the community and for the public. And I also would like to say that, because one of the things I've listened to a lot is I've heard a lot of expression of people are worried because of the fact that we're calling this the downtown safety plan, and it has come up in quite a lot of conversations that we're only thinking or paying attention to the downtown area. So I just want to make sure that I make that clear that that's not the case. What the case is that the downtown area has taken so much of our resources away from every other part of the town because we're always constantly having to go to the downtown area. So that's taken all our resources away from being able to go to West Pratt and beyond, or go to traffic control when we've had people that complain to the Traffic Safety Committee about speeders, or any of those things that we've had to basically pull away from because the downtown has taken so much of our resources and time. And so with the plan, that frees up resources for other parts of town. It's not that we only want to concentrate on the downtown area. It's that we realize and we see that the downtown area just needs a dedicated unit to be able to function and to keep going and keep businesses coming in and opening and keep people feeling like they want to go and spend their time downtown. But in the same breath, we're also able to cover a lot of other areas all over town. And I know that people have already said that. I mean, I even heard one of the comments that came up at one of the select boards was, I never see a car where I live. And I listened to that. And so I think that individuals will be able to call me and tell me that they've seen more cars where they live.
Well, that was actually going to be like a second part of my question. Do you find that it's doing what you intended it to do, which was to free up for the outside? I guess so. You already answered my second question, so that's good. That's all good news. So I'll ask another second question. What do you got in the Super Bowl?
Nobody. Anybody that knows me knows that answer. So.
Okay.
I can talk a little bit about the substation and what I know about that.
Sure. I've got a couple of questions as well. But go ahead.
Okay. So we are, as you know, the substation was funded out of the revolving loan fund, so it's not in the budget. It's already been funded. So we can work on that whenever we can get to it. The problem is that we need to complete the membrane work and the HVAC work on that building before we can do the renovations for the substation, and those are scheduled to be done in the spring. So we're expecting we probably won't have the substation up and running this summer, but by the end of summer, early fall, we should have it activated. So.
Okay, great. Thank you for that update.
And does that mean that the rest of the building will be available for rental then too?
No.
After the membrane work and the HVAC work is completed, and probably most of the renovations there that could get in the way of leasing out the other space. But if anyone's interested in leasing any of that space, they should contact the town.
Great, thank you. Chief Hardy, thank you for the presentation. So you answered a lot of my questions already. One of the things that I think folks in the community are probably less aware of is the collaboration with a lot of social services providers and housing providers in our community under the One Brattleboro umbrella. And so Elizabeth, myself, John, Assistant Chief Evans, Chief Hardy, leaders from organizations all across the community have been kind of meeting on a monthly basis since when? Like April. Last summer,
last spring,
kind of thing. We had a kickoff in April, and then it took a little while to get going. And that work is kind of gathering steam, I would say, and is beginning to move towards being impactful. And so one of the things that I wonder about is any potential collaboration between the BRAT unit and, say, the outreach teams that are working with, say, Groundworks, Turning Point, AIDS Project, HCRS. I know that we already have some HCRS embedded folks. And so I just wonder if you have any thoughts about that moving forward.
Absolutely. That's already happening. Honestly, like I said, because Justin was our first hire, and he already has all these working relationships with all of these, particularly AIDS Project, Turning Point, He cooperates with some of the outreach teams from the other organizations. If they're out in the street, or if he deals with somebody that he knows they have other services that are coming into them, then they cooperate also. And it's a major one too, because with him being a part of Project Care, and also what we started was we started a program where we highlight people that have remained in recovery, and we celebrate that. And so he's been a major part in that. We actually have our next celebration coming up for an individual in town that has been in recovery and succeeded. And so all of those programs we're doing in conjunction with keeping our level of communication open with all of the other outreach programs. And so that's always going to have to happen as far as Brattleboro, because there are so many, we don't want to keep overlapping or stepping on each other's, progress with their individuals. So that's always going to be that kind of progress. And another thing that's been really, really helpful to us is that we've started being a part of the situation table, which is that came up from the governor's office with Jim Baker's group. And so I have put Assistant Chief Evans as the point of contact for that. And that's another thing that we incorporate Justin in, as well as Captain Petlock. And so that's a whole nother outreach that we're having as far as being able to get together with our partners and helping individuals that need resources.
Great, thank you. I wonder if you wouldn't mind speaking to what the situation table is for folks in the community that aren't really aware of it.
I'll have you talk about it.
Yeah. Oh, all right. So the situation table, I guess really briefly, is just a way for all of the groups in town, all the providers in town, especially the ones that have direct outreach to people in the community, to be able to collaborate together effectively on providing services to those people, and to hopefully minimize a lot of the overlap and non-communication, I guess I would say, between those groups. So far, I think we had our training. It was 2-day training, and then we just had our first actual situation table last week. And so far, that's gone really well. The kickoff went better than I thought it would, and I was pretty excited about that, and really, really excited about it.
Yeah. Thank you, Assistant Chief Evans. Liz, you want to speak to it?
Yes. I really thought that the situation table was impressive in meeting the goals of collaborating and meeting people with complex needs on a one-to-one basis, and really achieving our goals for them personally and for the community. And everyone that I saw, walking out of that meeting was really impressed and really encouraged.
Nice.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think it's potentially a much more impactful approach. We were present at the first one last week, and I can't really get into any of it because of confidentiality, but there were cases presented that are particularly challenging in our community, and it's time sensitive. It's like up-to-date data, it's the actual people in the room that are working with folks, and then those people are getting together to kind of come up with a more robust collaborative plan to address whatever the situation is. And so I think that's, I think when we're talking about the Downtown Safety Action Plan, we're talking about the BRAT unit, we're talking about the substation, but we're also thinking about its connections to the work that's happening under the One Brattleboro group, which includes this broader collaboration and the situation table. So I think, I think there's a lot of stuff going on, and I think people should feel hopeful. Yeah, thank you. Good. All right, let's hear from the public. Amanda. And so again, just a reminder, if questions come this way, I'll bounce them
Amanda
over
Ellis
this way.
Thurber, Brattleboro. Thank you, Chief Hardy. I have been seeing more cruisers. I was the one who said that. Anyway, my question is related to HIPAA and related to work happening in Montpelier. I heard something about the Attorney General helping social service agencies' ability to coordinate, because some of that was protected by HIPAA, and I just wanted an update on that. And if, because that was a barrier to collaboration, right, that created that overlapping. So I'd love to hear more.
Okay. Assistant Chief Evans or Chief Hardy?
I don't believe there's been any changes to HIPAA or similar things that related to patient confidentiality, but we've worked on and have some new processes for how we can effectively bring information to each other and provide the best overall response to individuals that are in need of care. So we've worked on how to team better with those restrictions in place.
And I think also because being the police, it works the opposite way of HIPAA for us. We can give information that we come across to these organizations, whereas they may not be able to share their information with us.
Thank you. Other questions from the public? Mr. DeGray?
Dick DeGray. How many actual officers do we have available for duty right at this point, and BRAT team members?
Is that the end of the question?
I have several, but I was...
Go ahead.
Well,
I will write them
lead to
down.
my next... Those are easy numbers to just spit out. I was hoping that she could just go whatever...
Chief Hardy, would you like to answer that question very briefly?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Ready to work right now, 23.
And then BRAT team folks, 4, you said?
4.
Yeah.
On the street, 4.
But they're still training. They're
Yeah.
in training.
Right.
And we have 3 officers that are in field training. So they're not ready to work right now, but we're at 26.
So we'll be at 26.
Yeah.
So once you get your 3 field officers and your full BRAT team complement, will you be pulling the officer off of duty on Main Street and then just leaving the BRAT team, or will you continue to have a police officer downtown as we have right now, which I believe from comments that I've heard has proven to be a huge improvement with activity downtown?
Yes.
Do you have lots of follow-up questions to that, or is that the end of it?
No. I do have a concern, though, as I was just looking at the budget, is that we're at 50% of the year, and you are already over budget and overtime. And I have a concern about that, and if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I don't think we're going to talk about the budget right now.
Well, that's a question for the police, and since they're right here, why not ask the chief?
Let's ask the operation question first of all. So, are we going to be pulling an officer from downtown once folks are trained up?
No.
Okay.
And that's the reason that I presented the plan the way I did with the 3 additional officers, because I need an officer to be with the BRAT unit since they are not level 3 officers. And I think that I can argue the necessity for that, because having an officer that's a level 3 officer downtown, and within the course of a week and a half, he was attacked 3 times. And he's in a full uniform and has a weapon. So we do have that potential in those volatile situations, and that's why we will have an officer available that is dedicated to that area for backup for the BRAT individuals.
Okay.
And I didn't hear that.
Yeah, thank you. And then the other question is about police overtime, which I'm saying is more relevant to our finance department report. If there's a very brief answer where we stretch the limits of germaneness that you want to give, fine. But otherwise, I'm happy to wait until the finance report.
No, because I'd rather not answer that unless I have the line in front of me.
That's fair. Yep, yeah. No problem.
Because I'm sure it's true, but I can't speak as to why it's true.
Yeah, thank you. That's fair. John?
I did want to ask the chief to clarify on the additional officers who've been hired and are going to the academy. How many is that?
Right now,
Yes,
3.
3. Okay,
Right now, we have 3 that started the academy yesterday.
right. And then you're planning for the 30th officer for the summer academy.
For the summer.
Is that
Yes,
okay?
we split it just because it takes so long, as I've sat here and said so many times, to be able to get one person that we can do a complete and total background check on, have them ready for one of the classes in the academy because they only have 2 a year. And so we weren't able to make the person because the person actually relocated here from somewhere else. So it took us longer to be able to do their complete background check in time. So that person will be waiting to go into the August Police Academy.
Great. Thank you, Chief Hardy. I think it's also worth remembering that some of the actions that we took in the summer were kind of partly informed by timelines to do with training and the fact that there are only 2 academies. So good reminder about that. Mr. Evans-Franz, you had a question.
Good evening, Isaac Evans-France. Thank you very much, Chief Hardy, for that explanation, and Assistant Chief Evans. I'm looking forward to sitting down with you and talking more. I had a question these are questions that I've been hearing as I've been knocking on doors. I'm running for a select board seat. One of the questions that I've heard is, are the BRAT officers uniformed? I could
Would you
have
mind directing them this way?
Sure,
I know
sure.
it's awkward, but
Yeah.
if you have multiple, it'd be good to hear them.
Sure. So the first question is whether the BRAT officers will be uniformed, and if there is some other identifying way that they'll be, or how they would be identified as a BRAT officer.
Uh-huh.
The second question is, what is the extent of their power? For instance, do they have the power to detain individuals? And what will be a measurement of the success of the program?
Great. Okay, thank you. Chief?
Yeah. Okay. Yes, they will be uniformed. Their uniform is different. We tried to come up with something that would definitely show they are not police officers with enforcement actions. BRAT is not there for enforcement. They're there to offer resources and to be an extension of our eyes and ears in the area. So their uniform will be totally different. It is, and actually, we will, when we do our campaign, we'll make sure people understand that that is their official uniform. We let them create their official logo. So even though it will have this part that shows that they were for Brattleboro, they also have a bear on skis as a part of their uniform. And you'll see that that's a big circle that'll be on the uniform. And they also have a reflective line across the top of their shirts. So all of these things so people can identify who they are while they're walking up and down town. And they will have a radio, of course, to be able to contact us. They will not be there for enforcement, but they can have someone, they can trespass someone, which is a basic level 2 duty that they can perform. And if there's an issue beyond that, that's why we will have an officer, a level 3 officer nearby to handle those kind of things, because we don't want to put them in those positions. So they will not be doing any enforcement actions, but we can pull them, of course, for major emergencies or events, and we can also pull them for traffic control.
Okay, thank you. And a measurement of success, how will we know if this is working?
I believe, besides the fact that we're trying to gather data as far as our call volume and the types of calls that we have within certain areas. I think the measure of success won't just be in the downtown area, because I think that if we can lower some of our call volume in the entire town, I think that we'll be successful, which we feel that we will be able to. We've already been able to increase our responses to the issues that people have come to see me about, as far as traffic issues, as far as people speeding through their neighborhoods, as far as people passing past school buses. We've been able to put more officers out to deal with those issues already. So I expect that we'll be able to show some kind of data that'll show that all of our efforts are being successful.
Great, thank you. Other members of the public with questions? I can't remember your name. Missy, come on up.
Melissa Swim, Brattleboro, District 8. I don't really have a question. I just wanted to commend the chief. Last night, I inadvertently saw the end of a little bit of an acrimonious situation. And I just wanted to commend you and your officers for how respectful and just how well they handled the situation. I think there's a lot of different, all of us have a lot of different opinions about safety in town right now. But I think that we can all agree that we're very, very lucky to have your leadership. And I feel safer knowing that you've got so much going on, but you're also so empathetic and careful with folks that need more help. So I just wanted to say thank you. I really, really appreciate that.
Thank you.
I wanted to tell you that what I witnessed yesterday, and I had a friend with me as well who has different ideas about safety in town, and we were both incredibly impressed by what we saw. So I just wanted to
Thank you. Thank you.
think on.
Thanks, Missy. Kate?
Kate O'Connor, Brattleboro, and I'm sorry I'm asking this again, but I just want to make sure I understand. We have 23 sworn police officers now, and 3 are getting trained, which will mean we'll have 26 sworn police officers, and on top of that, we have 4 BRAT team members. I just want to make sure I get it right so I don't tell people the wrong thing. And that's what I just heard, and I want to make sure that that's what I heard.
Certainly what I heard, Chief.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
John?
And you just got to make sure you don't miss the 4 additional ones going to the academy who've been hired. They're just not operational yet.
So we have like 26 really in the works right now,
yes.
plus 4.
And yes, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Because and I'm not by no means I don't want anyone to feel I'm being coy. I don't count officers as fully trained officers ready to work until they pass our field training. And so the 3 that we have in field training right now have another 6 weeks of training to do. And no one gets counted as a Brattleboro police officer until they graduate that training program. That's why I'm breaking it down like that.
Yeah, appreciate that clarification. I think we see that come up from time to time. You know, I mean, not everyone makes it through training programs.
No.
And we have a high standard, and we also see it with our fire department of minimum staffing. And I'm sure we see it in public works as well. You know, so thank you. Other questions from the public? Mr. Wessel.
Thank you. Tim Wessel, District 3. I'm one of the several select board candidates that seem to come out of the woodwork when February comes around.
Yeah, it's funny. I'd see all.
But I wanted to just say something. One is to thank and congratulate the Brattleboro Police Force, because they, I feel, have been for many years a very good reflection of our town. We are a compassionate town. Our compassion runs the gamut for our political persuasions. I think, sort of playing off of what Missy just said, I see compassion on the right, I see compassion on the left, and certainly in the center. And I want to congratulate the police force for coming together and working with all kinds of community partners, as Liz was saying, especially the hire of Justin Johnson, having had some experience working with Justin in the past. He's just an absolute gem for the town, I think. The question I have is that in that recognition of compassion, I'd like to also recognize that in those disagreements about the role of police and how they work with our town and are part of our town's compassion, I'm wondering if everyone's aware that there are individuals and even groups that are operating sort of solely, sort of on their own rules, helping people, whether it's, you know, taking people to an appointment or giving them a hotel room, gathering funds for that, getting them to that hotel room. I would love to hear that the town and the police force are willing to extend a hand to those groups if they were to need it. I'm concerned about individuals who, come across other individuals that might not be able to handle, the level of need that these folks have. And I would love to know that our police force and our town is willing to offer a hand with no regard to political questions or anything like that. Even if it's a group that is not willing to work with the police, I want them to feel that the police are also there to serve them as well. So just if you want to comment on that.
Thanks. Chief, any reaction to that?
Yeah, I think that, I think that's fair. That's a fair statement. I will say that I don't think there is any, I truly do not believe, but I think I've made it clear that we are willing to help anyone who will accept our help. And I think that I can speak very clearly and be very satisfied in saying that that is the message that I give my officers. When they're out there, they reflect on me. And so if anyone wants our help or asks for our help at any time, we will give them the assistance. I think that it's happened quite often that people do not want our help, do not want our involvement, have been very vocal in saying that they don't want our help. And I don't believe that that'll change. And I don't believe that no matter what we do, if we are just the police, we just are the police, and people would rather not interact with us at all if they can't help it. But I don't think that there's anyone that should feel that we wouldn't help them in their time of need and our ability to do something maybe that they couldn't do. I stress very often on people trying to be empathetic and helping people and putting their own physical well-being at risk by some of the things that they would like to do for others.
Great, thank you. Other members of the public who haven't spoken that would like to speak? Mr. Patras.
Hello, I'm Hank with Brattleboro News, planethank.com. So I have more of like a comment about what I've seen with the Brat team and the Brattleboro Police downtown. So I'm asking people to maybe open their mind to this that have been against adding to the police. I feel like the Brat team is exactly what they've been asking for, especially with like reading comments, listening to other people's arguments. This is a softer approach. It is somebody, Justin is a direct line to the human services that everybody like is asking for. Why are we doing more police? There's a diversity of calls. There's only 36% of the calls equal arrests. I think that it's very important that maybe people open their minds to the idea that this is exactly what you're asking for. But it falls under the Brattleboro Police Department because in these situations, like kind of like I know what Missy was talking about, her situation, these are fast changing situations. I've seen this where it starts off that it could be a mental health issue and it turns into a violent, dangerous situation in seconds. That's why you need a police officer there to assess that. To send a social worker there only, you're putting them in a risk. Maybe 9 times out of 10 it doesn't happen, 5 times out of 10. But when it does happen, you need an officer there. And a Brat team member who's trained and is a level 2 officer is going to be able to respond to that much better and have an officer downtown. Like Chief mentioned, we had an officer fight 3 different people by himself, and our officers were uptown at Black Mountain Road. And it takes them 5 minutes to get downtown. And that is why he did not expect those situations to turn into a violent situation, and they did. So when people are asking, why do we have to have an officer there? Why is a mental health issue? Why are people calling? They don't have somewhere else to call. Why don't they have a direct line to social services? And that's why. And it's very important. I think it's a very soft approach. And we do not see this in a lot of communities. And it's sort of something that we should be proud of. And I think people, like I said before, should open their minds to this and just accept it. This is a cost that we're all arguing about with the budget that we kind of have to own. We see this stuff. I've documented this stuff. It is happening. Whatever reason why, what the solution is, whatever it is, but it's something that's happening, and I think that this is a great solution for it, and it's a very powerful tool that we should all sort of embrace.
Great. Thank you. Thanks.
And I'd like to say something on that also. I don't, because I just want to make sure that when we're presenting all that we're doing. And I have such great people that have joined my team, and I would be remiss if I didn't talk about them. And a big part of Brat also, because Brat is who we hired, right? So Justin was just a natural choice for us to do what we wanted to get done. The Brat team and officers that we've hired, and I think people are going to be very impressed with them because they are all young and they just want to be able to give back to their community. But we also incorporate our embedded liaisons, our embedded mental health workers, and I would be remiss if I didn't speak on them, because even though they don't work, we don't pay their salary, but they're embedded with my department, and I couldn't ask for two better people. I mean, I can't think of any person that would ever have anything that they could say negatively about Knowles Wentworth or Kara Rideout. I truly don't. I think they've gone above and beyond their duties as being our embedded liaisons, particularly Knowles, who is, all I have to do is pick up the phone and he's there. And he's been there for the town numerous times.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, appreciate
I just wanted to make sure I mentioned them.
Yeah, thank you. Members of the public who have not spoken on this issue, we prioritize those folks first. If you have a real quick second thing that you'd like to say, go right ahead.
Me again, Amanda, Brattleboro. I'd love to hear more about your relationship with the state police and drug dealers coming through Brattleboro with our 3 exits. I'd also like to hear about the potential for revenue from traffic tickets and what projections could be. Sorry, town of Brattleboro, if we're getting more tickets, but are there revenue projections that we could get from speeding tickets?
Okay. So if you have a quick response to any of that, we'll take it, and then I think we're going to move on.
Okay. We maintain a good relationship with state police and sheriffs, all right? Because first of all, why wouldn't we? We all have the same job to do, and we also all need to be able to count on each other. As far as it's funny that this ticket and revenue thing came up. I will not talk on revenue, but I will say, as far as we are concerned, my department, I just had to have this conversation with someone, and I'll state it simply that my officers are a reflection of me, and so if I'm going to be empathetic and thoughtful of some of the individuals that are here trying to just make it day to day, and driving their vehicle is the only way they can live, I think we're just a little bit less likely to impose those kind of penalties upon them if it's not completely something we need to do. I want my officers to use discretion. So I don't know about what that would be. I can't answer that. I don't know. That would be something I would think the town would have to figure out. But I just want to make sure that is very clear as far as we understand when we have people in town we have a lot of people that are first-time drivers from other places that we deal with in town, and we have people that, like I said, they're just trying to make it day to day. So.
Great, thank you.
Just one more thing.
One more very brief thing, and then I'm going to wrap up.
And just to make it clear that Brattleboro does not have quotas for tickets, anything like that.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Peter?
Yeah. So on top of the great job that Chief Hardy and her staff have been doing, I think we would be remiss not to let everybody know that she's also been filling in as our emergency management director on top of all this other stuff she's been able to accomplish. So thank you for that.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for that presentation and discussion. I think it was very helpful. And at this point, we're going to take a 5-minute recess, and then we'll hear from the fire department. All right, it's 8 o'clock, and we're going to resume our meeting. Okay. So next item on the agenda is the fire department's quarterly reports, and we have Assistant Chief Keir with us and Superintendent Fritz, and they wrote a beautiful memo. Thank you for that. It was honestly really great. And so I'm assuming you'd like to summarize this memo and then take some questions.
I'll do my best.
Very good.
So thank you. As always, it's a pleasure to come here. I do enjoy it. It gives me an opportunity to talk about some of the things that are happening at BFD that we're really proud of. So undoubtedly the last quarter was very busy, specifically the month of November. We had 8 major fires and went mutual aid 5 times. What is most notable about those particular fires is the 3 that occurred on November 7th, November 8th, and the 13th. November 7th, we had the large fire on Canal Street that extended a 12-hour operational range. And then within less than 48 hours or less than 24 hours, we also had the 10.5-acre fire that was on Melton Road. That particular fire had an on-scene time of about 36 hours, and we had some of our membership on that fire line for that amount of time. So really proud of our crews there. The complexity that involves when we're dealing with fires of that nature to put equipment back into service, to take fire hose that's hanging in the tower to restock it and to utilize on another large incident is pretty significant. So a lot of professionalism there that we're really proud of. I would also kind of note that during those fires, all the emergencies, both before, during, and after those incidents, were answered without delay. And I think a large part of that is we're real grateful to our mutual aid partners. And we're real grateful to the Department of Public Works. They really went above and beyond any expectations that we had. They served not only on the fire lines with us on both those large fires, but we're part of the command structure on the Canal Street fire as well. So very grateful for Department of Public Works. And just some interesting points. A lot of people had, during that month of November leading into December, the dry weather was a concern. There was an 18% higher increase in burnt acreage throughout the state for the month of October and November, and that was higher than the last previous 25 years. So that is a significant number. I thought it was notable to mention in this report. From the Fire Prevention Division, I know there's been some concern about the revenue coming back in from our inspections. We've kind of really started to go after that, going and trying to clean up inspection reports and property owners that have not been so compliant with their fees. And so we've really done a pretty good job of that. We started with what was Zone 4 and now have moved into Zone 3 and 2 to collect those extra fees and to clean up those properties that have yet to be yet to receive their certificate of habitability. So we've done a good job with that. I even wrote in here that's been moderately successful. We're able to utilize some staff that are on long-term leave and doing some light duty stuff to really kind of push that forward. And we're really starting to see some dividends of that system. So those that are a little bit more in tune with the fire prevention program too, we've completed Zone 4 and we are also starting Zone 1. So in that inspection cycle that began pre-COVID, we anticipated that being a 4-year cycle. It took about 6 years, but that was, I can say very comfortably that it was a COVID-related expense there. And I feel that as we start Zone 4 or Zone 1, we do anticipate getting through all 4 zones within that 4 years as originally outlined. Community Connect, I like to always note Community Connect. It's a free and secure, easy way platform for the public to use to get information out there to our first responders in a very quick and timely fashion. That's a link there. Staffing, at the request of town manager, he asked me to provide a little bit of a staffing update and things that are happening. We are currently 2 positions short within the ranks of BFD, one being an entry-level firefighter and the other one being a fire chief. We have 6 employees on probationary status, and then they're all in various levels of their clearance to operate at different things. So much like Chief Hardy said, to be fully capable of operating all the equipment and then operating at both stations, that takes about a year's time. But it does become part of our staffing matrix once you're able to operate certain equipment. So And then further, we also have 2 acting lieutenants, and then we have 2 employees on extended medical leave. I wouldn't be doing my due diligence as the assistant fire chief, and if I didn't note some of the other things, and that is, the duties of the fire chief has been spread out between both myself, spread out between chief and assistant chief along myself, and I've pushed a lot of those responsibilities, and I'm very appreciative to my staff, such as Superintendent Fritz, Superintendent Newtons, the 3 captains, and some of the other lieutenants have really picked up some of the tasks that are associated that are overspill from carrying those 2 weights. And I'm very grateful that they've taken this opportunity as a level of professional growth and really kind of taken it without any excuses, or they see the need for this to happen. It has been discussed that the operational models on emergencies needs to be changed with the absence of the fire chief. That has also changed, and we've discussed different models to make sure that those emergencies are covered. Both myself, the 2 superintendents, and the 3 captains feel very comfortable with the systems that we have in place to make sure that while I'm not available, that there is a command structure in place at any large-scale incident. So, and again, I do appreciate the exceptional leadership of my staff. Certifications. If I could have Mr. Moreland just go to the next slide. I really appreciate Superintendent Fritz. We heard from a few members of the public and a member of the RTM Finance Committee about some of the unclarity in our charts. And he was able to put what you see on the screen today together in a very short amount of time, and extremely appreciative. I think this makes for a much better report. But what I wanted to talk about real briefly was the certifications that we currently hold. This pie chart is showing you specifically the EMS certifications. As you can see, 49% are EMT, and 30% of our staff are advanced EMT, and 18% of our staff are paramedic. What I also wanted to really kind of note here is that we have a lot of training going on, and that was really the key part in both this slide and the next that I wanted to note. We have 2 members currently in paramedic training, and they're going through that process. We have 4 members in advanced EMT training, and we have 1 member currently in EMT training. So we're really proud of that, and there is a lot of things happening in the walls of BFD, and that can even be further noted in the next slide, if you don't mind. And there are fire certifications. I think specifically over the last 3 years, we've talked a lot about EMS, and that has been a focal point, and rightly so, to the things that we do at BFD. But it is also really important to note that there are also a lot of high-level certifications and things that our membership is doing every day. With the majority of our memberships holding a firefighter 2, one of the things that you will note is that, okay, these numbers don't add up to the 33 people that we have currently on staff, but that represents the cross-staff training that we've been talking about for the previous 3-4 years, whereas I may have a paramedic that is also firefighter 2, and that same person may have training in fire investigations. So all of these particular certifications require upkeep to maintain these level of certs. All of the certifications that are on there are pretty high level certs. Like the previous EMS slide, we also have some people in programs right now. I wrote in the quarterly report there was 2, but there's actually 3 members going to the fire instructor program right now on top of that other EMS certifications that I previously had mentioned. With that, I'm going to turn it over to EMS Superintendent Fritz. For most of you who know Superintendent Fritz, he joined our department a little over a year ago. He was asked to do a task that, quite frankly, should take 3 to 5 years, and he's done a remarkable job in just over 1 year. So what he's going to talk about is all of our EMS operations.
Thank you, AC. Good evening. For those of you who don't know, my name is Billy Fritz. I'm the EMS superintendent. So the EMS overview is in there, and it's for you to peruse. I do want to hit a couple high points. Something that's happened over this last quarter is, excuse me, is we started a PREVENT initiative. So that is sponsored by the Department of Health through the state, which Brattleboro has been invited to attend. That is a buprenorphine program, which is EMS administered, and we're very excited because we had our kickoff meeting in December. So there's more to come on that, but again, I think it's part of that package where we're really working towards a full recovery and overdose response in our community. Speaking of that, so let's talk about our call volumes. So call volumes is also usually pretty interesting to everybody. So we provided that data in the report. Here's another graphic for you. So for the last quarter, this is October to December, we had 782 EMS responses. Out of those, we had 731 patient encounters. And so that means that, 51 people were not there when we showed up. Out of that, 634 were transported, 97 refused transport or transport and treatment, which is, again, the percentages that you see there. So then, in our last meeting, we talked about the types of calls. So we run lots of types of calls. And so this is not for you to necessarily understand every single call that we run, but this is to give you an example of the call types that we experienced in this last quarter. So to break that down, similar to what we presented in our last report is some of our most common encounters. And those most common encounters, on the next slide, deal with the different or the major buckets, as I call them, that we fall into. So you will see that overdoses, psychiatric problems, and general unwell are some of our highest numbers of calls that we see. Weakness, stress, chest pain, syncope, those also fall into the highest categories or the most common calls that we respond to. Something to speak about as well, which is in the report and I am extremely proud of, is the District 13, back one, thank you. District 13 data for Vermont came out about cardiac arrests, and there are two cardiac arrests that happen in Brattleboro, which we had ROSC. ROSC is return of spontaneous circulation. Those two people left the hospital neurologically intact, so they went home to their family to hug their kids, their family, and their friends. So I think that is a huge celebration on behalf of our department. So that is something that came out as part of the state data. The next part, and I think which is what most people are interested in, is a lot of our EMS billing. So our last EMS billing report wasn't that exciting for many people because we didn't have tons of data. We have a lot more data points now. We're not done, but I wanted to give you some of the data points. This data, pointing it out, is from July 1st to December 31st. Why? Well, we didn't have a lot of things to report in that first quarter, so this is first and second quarter. These are our billings. So we had 1,140 EMS trips billed or processed, and I'll explain those terms here in just a minute, with a gross charge of $1.6 million. Now, there are some contract allowances or contractual allowances. You've probably heard me talk about this term before. Contractual allowances basically means what we're able to bill. There are fee structures that the government and insurance companies have set up that doesn't allow us reimbursement over a certain threshold based on services provided. We've discussed that previously, but that's what we call contract allowances. So those contract allowances obviously have to be removed from our gross charges. That's where we come to our net number. So our net number is about $1.4 million. Now, that's broken up into many different types of payers, as you've been familiar with us talking about the reimbursement before. Medicare, Medicaid, largest reimbursers. Also, the people that have the contractual allowances, which have the lowest reimbursement because of their fee structure. Again, just reminders for everybody. I wanted to point out these numbers, and again, these are where we'll explain here over the next few minutes the differences. So Medicare billings is about $629,000, and our Medicaid billings are about $513,000. Of that, Vermont is $351,000. You may ask why I'm breaking that out. Well, Vermont is paying in a very timely fashion. We have that process ironed out. They are EFTing, electronically transferring their reimbursements to us, and that is working very well. Of the $351,000 that were billed, remember billed versus contractual allowance, of that was billed, so far we've received about $75,000 for that quarter. We've since received more money, but for the quarter there. And I want to help explain that a little bit. So I use the example of Vermont Medicaid and contractual allowances. So I gave Mr. Autumn, he is a fictitious person, he has Medicaid. We treat and transport him at the BLS level. We transport him 1 mile. We bill $1,400 and $22 for that 1 mile. That is a bill of $1,422. For Vermont Medicaid, for that BLS transport, we will receive $432.45 for the transport, $8.71 for that mile, which brings us to the $441.16. That is 31% of what we bill. That contract allowable, unrecoverable cost is the $980.84. So when we talk about our Medicaid numbers, what we bill versus what we receive. Now this is a BLS example, ALS example. Advanced life support has a higher reimbursement depending on their fee structure, but giving you an example to explain where those 35% that we come up with for reimbursement come from. So when we go to our breakdown of our percentages for what billed for our last 2 quarters, you can see that Medicare is about 38%. Medicaid, all Medicaid, not just Vermont, inclusive of New Hampshire, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New York, 31%. Then you'll see we have our private pay insurance at about 24%, self-pay and other, which is to be determined still, which is another 7%. This is our payer breakdown. Now, something as you'll also see in the report, Medicare. Medicare, we have problems billing them. Our third-party biller, Golden Cross, is required to submit bills electronically to the federal government. There is a connection problem. It's outlined a little bit in the report, but at the end of the day, they can't receive the bill from Golden Cross on behalf of Brattleboro today. We have been working for the past 3+ months, and it is escalated to now a tier 4, where we have the senior enrollment person trying to get that connection to work. They can bill, Golden Cross is successfully billing for us for our Medicaid and for our private pay insurances, but right now we do have still a hiccup with Medicare, which we are actively working on. That means that $629,000 is sitting in a bucket, processed, ready to go. Once that connection is ready to go, Golden Cross presses the button and magically it goes through the ethers and ends to the federal government, which will be processed and electronically paid to us. That is a big holdup right now for Medicare. Unfortunately, anyone who has dealt with some of these technical challenges with the federal government, it is a challenge. But I work on it regularly. I work on it with our partners at Golden Cross, and we have made very good headway. I hope that in the next 7 days or so, it should be resolved, because they have really isolated the problem. Has to do with when it started, they did paper enrollments. Now it's electronic enrollment form. It won't let a New Hampshire company submit it for Vermont. So again, something that we're well aware of. Another piece of this has to do with people don't just have one insurance. It's a little bit complicated. So somebody will have Medicare with a Blue Cross Blue Shield backup. That means we can't bill Blue Cross Blue Shield until Billy is billed for his Medicare. And that's where that 0%, that $10,000 falls into, and some of our self-pay. Some of those folks have Medicare. We don't have their Medicare information. We can't run their eligibility yet. So before we send someone a bill, we need to do our due diligence, run it through Medicare, make sure that they don't have that eligibility before we send it to one of our community members. So that's a hiccup that we are currently experiencing. With our people who have primary private pay, we are getting those payments. So our last example, I gave an example of a Cigna bill. So we have 9 in that period that were Cigna. The gross charge, $12,000 with mileage. Our contract allowable, again, there are things that they will not let us bill. Net charges are $7,080 of that 12. We have with Cigna, the 9 patients that we transported that have Cigna, we have a 55% reimbursement rate. So again, that's to show our overall differing reimbursement rates depending on the payer. So I know that it's a bit complicated, and I hope this explains it a little bit more, but this is to show the couple of buckets that people are in. If people have single private pay, they are billed. We have that money received, and if it's Vermont Medicaid, we have that received. New Hampshire Medicaid is still in process. Medicare at the federal government level is still in process. But I am very happy to report that we have $91,000 in the bank from these reimbursements. There is still more to come, right? And that's where a percentage of that $600,000 sitting for Medicare is still outstanding. And that is a challenge that I do not take lightly and that I work on very regularly. So with that is the overall of our EMS billing report.
Thanks so much.
And just lastly, just some basic news, not basic, but just the news and accomplishments of BFD that we're also really proud of. Brattleboro Fire, Brat PD, and Brattleboro Planning work jointly to provide the school district with an emergency preparedness training. Inspector Nelson and Superintendent Newton, along with myself, obtained fire inspection level 2 certifications. We had 3 members attend a training focus on multiple severe, helping the situational table preparedness training. And then we had Lieutenant Lambert and Firefighter Messini obtain their advanced EMT license. So then we hired Firefighter McAllister and Firefighter Snow are on board. And then last, but definitely not least, Chief Howard retired with 37 years of dedicated service to our community. So that concludes our report.
Great. Thanks so much, gentlemen. Lots of information there. I'm sure the Select Board has questions. So let's hear them. Richard.
I remember there was some talk a little while ago. Are you getting reimbursed for Medicaid non-transport?
So we can bill for Medicaid non-transport, and we will get reimbursed for that. I would have to look exactly how many of those specifically we have been reimbursed. Generally, as you see, we have about 18% is our no transport. We have a significant transport number, so I'd have to drill down to find a Medicaid, which is a no transport. But I could definitely get back to you. I know that vehicle is in place.
Yeah, but the other insurers don't do that?
We will send them a bill. Some do allow that, some don't. It depends on where they are. And that brings up a good point. We have billed 71 different private insurers. Oh. Yes. So that is just for this quarter. Let me be clear. There is more that has happened in January and February, which we have already started to bill. So that's where generally I can say yes, but not every insurance will pay that.
Okay. One other question. Your relationship with Golden Cross, you're just finishing out the work that they did, or is there some continuing relationship with them?
Golden Cross is our third-party biller, so they do our billing for our EMS transport.
Oh, okay.
Great. Other questions? Franz?
Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you, Daniel. I've got several different things to go over. It doesn't have to be all at once, but it's going to be a little bit of a conversation, I think. Let me just straighten out one thing. That your graph showed 17% non-transports in the second quarter, but the chart you gave us shows 38% non-transports for the first and second quarters combined. That would leave a huge number in the first quarter, and it doesn't seem like it adds up.
The last chart?
The last chart. Are you referring to the last chart in the slides?
No, I'm referring to there was one pie chart with the 17%, but there's a table on the last page of what's in our packet
Oh, okay.
that shows the non-transport
Okay.
figures.
Sure. I can definitely check into the discrepancy on there. And that's, I mean, it's a significant number in discrepancy. So I'll definitely follow up on that. Largely, I think where that number is coming from is this number represents calls such as motor vehicle accidents and things like that. And so where sometimes we respond to a motor vehicle accident that gets triggered as an EMS call on our first due system, and then our sirenry system, which is how we track actual EMS calls, and there could be a slight difference in there, and that's the difference between Billy gathering his data set versus me gathering data set from the fire side versus the EMS side. So I will follow up on that and get back to you.
Okay, great, thank you. And of course, that does have revenue implications as well. And trying to sort of piece together, I mean, the question is, how are we doing? Financially, how are we doing? And, I get it that Medicare hasn't paid us yet. I'm not quite as clear on what our expectation is from Medicare, that if, this $629,000 is sitting there waiting to be activated, what percentage of that are you actually expecting in terms of payment?
I would expect somewhere in the 30% range. So depending on a BLS versus an ALS transport and the loaded mileage. So I could estimate, what we've been using is around 33, 31%, somewhere in between there. So that would be what I would suggest out of that bucket.
So that's going to be just about $200,000 from Medicare.
For that quarter, or for those 2 quarters.
For those 2 quarters, exactly.
Correct.
And from Medicaid, we've billed $513,000, and we've received, well, there was the write-off, the 180 write-off, so we're down to 351. Was actually billed to Medicaid, and they paid $75,000. That's about, 20% maybe. Are we expecting more money from Medicaid on that?
So,
on those charges, are they still owing us money?
Yes, so want to be clear, Medicaid, the overall 513 is anybody who has Medicaid. Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, New York, Connecticut. We have several people from other states.
Okay.
New Hampshire has not processed our Medicaid payments yet. Vermont has. So when we talk about the 351 from Vermont, out of that, that's where 75,000 or so has been paid. So I would have to check exactly how many still are outstanding. Some of those inevitably have had a kickback where we have had to resubmit.
Okay, so, but that 75 that's been paid must also be part of the total payments received of 91,000 some.
Correct.
So there's really only about an additional 16,000 beyond what Medicaid has paid. Difference between 75 and 91.
Yeah, I would trust your math.
So where did that come from? Is that self-pay or is that private insurance? Or?
That would most likely be private insurance. Like Cigna, for example, has paid us several $1,000s. There are a couple of the other 71 which have. Now, a challenge that we also run into is most places, which we have not yet set up those electronic billing methods because they have to go through our initial process, will send us a check. So there is also delays sometimes with us getting a check, making sure it's accounted to that right thing. So we may have insurance companies that have paid, and we still have to associate that with the right bill.
Okay. So, so we're expecting some more money from Medicaid. We're expecting a couple of $100,000 from Medicare.
Mm-hmm.
Are we expecting more from anywhere else at this point? Like are there other buckets that are going to get emptied into our bank account at this point? Do you have any idea how much we'd be looking at from those sources?
Sure. I could speculate on what we would get. I would say that would be a guess. What I can say confidently is that out of that Medicare money, we will get a percent, let's say 31%. From there, we will then bill the secondary payers, right? So Billy may have primary Medicare with an AARP supplement. We cannot bill an AARP supplement till Medicare has done their initial bill pay. So what my assumption is that while Billy may have a primary and secondary, we get 31% of it, let's say from Medicare, we may get an additional 5, 7, 10% depending on what their supplement plan is. So that will fall into another bucket. So that 31% we'll say out of that 629 may be increased depending on how many supplements there are. Additionally, private pay. So these are all primary payers. We may have people, again, that have Medicare primary, Blue Cross Blue Shield supplement, which they pay for. Those would increase that reimbursement from the 30 some odd percent that Medicare will pay on their fee schedule.
Got it. So we still, the basic question of how are we doing in terms of our projected income over the year, we really still don't know. Is that fair to say?
We know that there's these buckets, as Billy described, of revenue or reimbursement to come back. And we know that these are the calls that are in those buckets. We feel very, very confident that we are going to meet those projections that outlined before we started this project, based on the data sets that we have already in there. Now, to get down to the granular level of all of the particular calls that are on that bucket and how that will jump in there, I cannot commit Superintendent Fritz to go onto every specific call to outline exactly how much money that is going to be. But in the 1,000-foot view, 100-foot view, I feel very, very confident that we will meet those projections that you folks as a select board and the community expects us to meet with EMS reimbursement.
I'm going to just jump in
good.
for a second, Franz.
Sure,
so
please.
on page 40 of the backup, there's a paragraph towards the top that makes a statement about how we're doing that I think is a little more definitive. So it says, looking at the numbers with the previous projections of a minimum reimbursement of 34%, which aligns with the average of the Medicaid, BLS, and ALS reimbursement rates, we expect that the 2 quarters, quarter 1 and quarter 2, will net approximately $536,000 in reimbursements. And so I'm assuming there's all kinds of work that went into that, and we don't need to get into like the nuts and bolts of that right now. But I'm assuming also that there's a level of confidence in that. There's probably erring on the side of caution, I would hope. And so if that sort of statement does come to be true in the fullness of time, and then quarters 3 and 4 replicate that, then we will be exceeding our budgeted expectation for this line. And obviously, as Billy kind of detailed, there's all kinds of holds up right now. So one of the things that I talked to John about earlier today is like, we don't want to have you guys come back here every month with this full presentation, but I think that it'll be good to get an update either as soon as a good news update is available or in a month's time if there's no good news update on the reimbursement point.
I think that's more than fair and something that we can obviously keep John abreast of.
Yeah.
And if I suspect that when those few buckets drop in, there'll be far less of this conversation. And I know I can say it very confidently to you folks and to the community, but until those numbers show up on the bottom line, I know and understand the conflict that you guys have there. So as soon as that drops in and we have those Medicare numbers in there, and we have some other private insurance in there that I'm so confident that will be there. I will most certainly update you, and just like I am, extremely proud of those fire things that we do. I'm going to be extremely proud of those numbers too, because our guys are running out the door nonstop to protect our community, and seeing those revenue numbers come in will be kind of a little bit of the fruits of the labor.
Great, thank you. Peter?
Yeah, so I'm going to pull it away from money. How's that?
Appreciate that.
All right. And because I know for most of the people who have this whole thing under a microscope, that money doesn't move fast enough. But you know what does move fast enough? And I think it had to do a lot with the heart attack saves that you guys. And would you say that your low response time was a factor in saving those people?
I think undoubtedly, one of the things that you guys looked for was accountability. That was a big part of the things that the select board had asked for. We have that accountability now, and we have that level of expectation on the floor. It's the mindset of everybody that rolls out the door. Now, I promise you those trucks are not driving any faster, so if you're saying, well, are we pushing our people to drive faster to the call? No, that's not the case. But what is happening faster is they are getting on those trucks and out the door in very fast parameters. And excuse me for not remembering the time that we set as a goal, but we are far exceeding the goal that it's set to get those trucks out the door. And that plays the part in not only those cardiac arrests, because those are really important, but those diabetic emergencies, that multi-system trauma, and all of those other calls as well.
Appreciate that.
I would say response time, systems of care, training. It is a puzzle, and we are one piece of that puzzle, but there was, with having bystander CPR and getting people trained and being able to act quickly, activate 911, getting advanced life support there as quick as possible, treating them on scene, stabilizing them before we move them to the hospital, that's what saved those lives.
So what you're telling me is there's a reason we use a third-party biller, because you're just too busy saving lives.
There's a reason we use a third-party biller.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Great. Other questions from the board? Richard?
Maybe this is real naive on my part, but looking at the EMS part of all of this, you're expected to run a fiscally responsible department knowing that you're only going to get paid 30% of what it costs to run it?
Yeah.
What's the question?
I just wanted to point that out because it's so bizarre.
Yeah, well, but I think that bleeds into our next item, and I think that the board should be well aware, right, of like how we budget for things and how we expend. The EMS reimbursement revenue is not the only driver of how the fire department's expenses get paid. Right, we also have the general fund tax dollars, and so, yeah, I mean, it would be great if we got 100% of, those EMS charges. But like, if you remember, I don't know, you weren't on the board maybe when we set the rates. We set a very high rate for transports. It's $1,400. Yeah. Golden Cross, when they were running the service, was charging people far less. And we did that because, if I'm wrong, please correct me, but we did that because we were trying to capture as much revenue from private insurance and those other payers that are going to reimburse at a higher rate than Medicaid and Medicare, because those are like set in stone. You get what you get, and you don't get upset.
I think both you and I were sort of in favor of a lower rate, thinking that we would be doing people a favor, but when it came down to insurance billing, this is what we kind of, at least I learned that. I'm not going to speak for Daniel, but I learned that on the fly. Yeah. That's where those sorts of, and I think, and if I'm speaking out of turn on your behalf, I think what Richard was trying to say, that it's pretty spectacular that you're able to do what you do with this big budgeted number and only getting 30% of it.
Good.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to clarify.
Right.
That's
but it's also important to note that EMS reimbursements are not the only revenue source for the fire department.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Liz?
Big sales.
Uh,
General fund tax dollars.
Gentlemen, I just wanted to thank you and the department for the good work that you do. And I note this paragraph that Daniel brought up. We are on par with the estimates all the way back to exceeding the estimate from the original AP Triton report. So it doesn't surprise me, and I think it's a good thing. And again, I thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Great. Other questions from the board, or can we go to the public? Public. Great. Public. I see a hand on Zoom, and it is Mr. Robert Ozer of Brattleboro, I believe.
You can see that?
I can just about.
I think I'm here. Thank you. Thank you for welcoming me. Thank you for your report. Maybe apologies for this, but I wanted to go back a little bit into the weeds, if I can, and go back to that the part of the report that says the third-party biller, Golden Cross, has been unable to submit claims electronically due to a trading partner ID issue. I think trading partner ID is a specific electronic funds transfer ID. Not the only one, but it is a specific one. And then it says that that issue escalated to a tier 3 ticket. I think in the oral presentation, it was said that that's now at tier 4. So then the delay has affected the ability to bill private insurance as well. And that'll continue. And so Medicare must process first. Then I think in the oral presentation, there was some indication that there was a problem because it was a New Hampshire company that was billing for a Vermont municipality. And that's a bit confusing. I'm wondering if all of that could be unpacked a little bit more and to explain what were the real factors that delayed in being able to use that trading partner ID?
I want to capitalize on a couple different things that Mr. Ozer mentioned, and that's different than the oral report versus the written report. My written report was actually a little bit tardy to what the town manager expects us to submit. That's because the level of things keep changing, and we are so close to receiving some of those monies from those buckets that we discussed that we wanted to provide as accurate a report as possible. And even in the course of since Friday, that's changed again with the work that Superintendent Fritz has done. And I'll let him explain.
Thank you for the question. To try to unpack it, a trading partner ID is like a vendor ID. There is a vendor ID that is appropriated to each J part, which is a different code for Medicare. And each J part is specific to a state. So Golden Cross is located in New Hampshire. Their J part is a New Hampshire trading partner ID. That, when you used to be able to submit on paper, they would send it to the government. The government says, okay, you can bill for Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, fill in the blank. The MAC, who controls Medicare, our MAC is NGS. NGS has an online system. So in order for Golden Cross to be able to submit for a new billing trading partner for the town of Brattleboro, they have to associate their trading partner ID with our Part J. Part J in New Hampshire is different from Part J in Vermont, different states, different buckets. So their number is a New Hampshire only number when you go to put it in the system. They bill for, I believe, 3 or 5 Vermont organizations. Those were set up prior to the MAC using an online system. There is a gate that does not allow a New Hampshire only number to work for any other state. So now that we are joining the party late, whereas these other people started earlier, they did it on paper. A person was able to override that. Now it's an electronic system with a partition. So the workarounds are either for Golden Cross to have to submit an entirely new trading partner ID, which would be a significant burden on them. We are working on that as an option. If they cannot manually process our trading partner ID to allow for their New Hampshire only number as the as the federal government recognizes, they bill for Vermont agencies for them to be able to allow us to add on to that connection. So that is where we are right now. Both Golden Cross and I am working from our different ends to try to achieve that with a successful resolution.
Billy, I take my hat off to you. So much. So it's complicated. We have professionals. We're working with other professionals. Hopefully we'll have some good news soon.
And yes, and I want to reiterate that those bills are processed. So the moment that MAC approves the EDI for submission to our third party biller, I apologize for all the acronyms, that will be one dump into the federal government, and that is one billing process which will be able to be reviewed and paid.
And the federal government still pays its bills?
Well, as of
today.
We're too busy.
That's not a me question.
Yeah, we'll see. Okay, let's move on to Heidi. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Hi there.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
We can, yeah. If you could just introduce yourself.
Heidi Fisher, District 7. I have a couple questions. One is, what have been the EMS expenses in the first 2 quarters in comparison to what the revenues have been? And the other is, how much are we paying Golden Cross for their third-party billing as our third-party biller?
Okay, thank you, Heidi. These are great finance questions. I don't know if you guys are prepared.
I have the
to answer
information
either
within
of them.
inside my tablet here, but I don't. It's going to take me a minute to draw that up, and I can get back to you first thing tomorrow morning with those answers.
Okay, great. Heidi, it's a reasonable question. We actually do have a finance department update coming up after this, and some of those line items are going to be in that report. Mr. DeGray.
I do believe the billing question was somewhere between $36,000 and $39,000 for the year, if my memory serves me correctly. Assistant Chief Keir.
Would you mind addressing the board?
I think that's how he should be addressed. He is acting chief. That's how I believe he should be addressed. And I can only hope that he's being compensated as the acting chief. And I did take note of his comment about how important it is to fill that position as chief, as it has been vacant. It's only been vacant for a couple of months, but we've certainly been 3 months. We've had that information for 3.5 months. So I am concerned about getting that position filled, as the acting chief notes in his memo. As for the billing, just a little bit of more clarity for me in terms of Golden Cross was billing for themselves into Vermont last year. And so what was the disconnect from last year to this year?
Any further questions, Dick? Billy, you want to try that last one?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. So Golden Cross is located in New Hampshire. Their primary office location is New Hampshire. They were providing a service in Vermont, but they are located in New Hampshire. And that's where our physical locations become an issue. So their number is for Vermont, even if they were to transport someone, their number is for New Hampshire, even if they were to transport someone in Vermont.
Okay. And the fire chief search, you want to speak to that, John?
It's ongoing. The fire chief position has not been vacant for a couple months. It's been vacant for 6 weeks. We are actively recruiting, and we expect to find a really good leader for that position.
Okay, great. Other questions from the public? Ms. O'Connor.
Kate O'Connor, Brattleboro. I appreciate all the numbers. I just have one clarification, and I want to make sure I get it all right. If we could bill everybody who's gotten our service, it would be like $1.6 million. If you take the Medicare out, that leaves $837,000 roughly that has been billed. And out of that $837,000, we've received $91,000. I just want to make sure I have that. I don't have that right?
No.
I'm going to ask a professional to answer the question.
I understand why it looks that way. That would not necessarily be accurate for the fact that there may be people that have a private insurance as a supplement. We have, yes, you could assume that that is the number, but we have not all of the 391. If they have a secondary insurance of private pay but primary of Medicare, they would be in both buckets.
Okay, so can you tell me how much has actually been billed? I was subtracting the Medicare number of 629,000 from the 1.6 million to get 837,000.
There is a slight clarification there. So there were gross charges of 1.6, but net charges of 1.4. So that's really the number that we're starting with.
That's what I did. I took 1.4 million, subtracted the
You said
Medicare
1.6.
number, 1.46, well, 1.4 million. Then I subtracted the Medicaid number of 629,000, and you get $837,000.
Okay.
If I did the math right.
I'm assuming you did, yeah.
So my question is out of the 837,000, if I have it right, we've gotten a total of $91,769. I just want to make sure I understand that.
Sure. I mean, that's kind of my understanding of it as well. So I think of the 1.4, you got 600,000 for Medicare, 500,000 for Medicaid. That's 1.1 million right there. Plus, I guess 300,000 from a variety of other sources. You said 71 different insurers were billed.
Right, but we haven't sent any Medicare bills out, so that's why I subtracted the 629 from the 1.4.
Yeah.
So if I got it right, we have sent out bills totaling $837,000. If you subtract out the Medicare, which
I'm not the biller, so I'm not.
I just want to make sure I'm not telling the wrong thing. So if I've done the math right, that's what I have. 837 has gone out, and we've got 91,000 back. So that's just one confirmation point.
Right, and so is the concern we haven't received very much money back?
I just want to make sure.
Because that's certainly a concern that I would have.
Yeah. And I just want to make sure I'm looking at it right. So that's my question, just to make sure I have the math right.
Right.
The second thing is this has gone back since 2023. It's how the numbers are presented. And if Kate gets an invoice on July 1st and Kate pays in December, we need to track it back to say, Kate got the bill in July 1st and she paid it in December. So we know that the month of the bills, these bills went out in July, even if they're paid in December, they're hooked back so we can know who got a bill in July and when they paid it. We've been through this 100 times. It's like an aging report in QuickBooks. You push the button. And we've been talking about this to 2023. So I'm wondering, when are we going to get it like that? It doesn't seem like rocket science to be able to tie.
I mean, I gotta say, from what I've heard from Billy and what we've heard from this report, it actually sounds maybe not rocket science, but certainly quite complex.
Well, I would think. Can I just? Oh, okay.
If you don't mind, I'd just like to respond real quickly. I think we really will get to that point where we are able to present you a monthly data report that is in that nature.
Okay.
I think we will get there.
Okay.
And I kind of go back to the statement that I said before. Right now, the primary target focus is not of that level for Billy's position, Superintendent Fritz's position. I really need him to be making sure that trucks are going out the door, that people are trained and adequately staffed to do that. And he is also doing all of these other great things and going over numbers and making sure that billing is in place like it is. To get at that granular level, the data does exist, but he would need to go into various levels of incidents and draw up various level Medicare, Medicaid bills, and all of these different things that is just too time consuming at our point of reference.
I guess my question to that is, aren't we paying Golden Cross to do the billing? And why don't they have that information? This is what I get really confused about. If Golden Cross is doing the billing, if they're sending the bills out and receiving the money, they should be the ones that should be easily able to provide this information. I don't expect the fire department to provide the information. I don't understand why the person who's sending, the company we are paying to send out the bills and collect the money isn't the one that could easily push the button on their giant machine and have this come out. That's my question.
Okay.
That's my. I don't.
It's a reasonable question.
Yeah, I don't get why they can't do it.
Okay.
And then in that same, like I don't expect you to do it. I don't get why Golden Cross can't do it. And then in that same vein here, it talks about the finance department getting involved in electronic transfers, fund transfers.
Where are you seeing that?
It's page 40, the third paragraph down. It says we're working with insurance companies to transition to electronic fund transfers. This has introduced administrative challenges, but we're working closely with the finance department to improve the detailed payment tracking, efficiency, blah, 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 blah. I thought we hired Golden Cross so that the Brattleboro Finance Department was not involved in the billing at all. So just wondering about that.
Okay, do you have any more questions? Okay. Billy, could you answer that last one?
I'd be happy to answer those. I do want to say with confidence that we will be able to provide monthly reports. Right now, it would be very ad hoc because Billy might have Medicare and that's still a zero bill right now. So I am very confident that we'll be able to provide that with an aging report. To speak to the EFT and finance aspect, that is a challenge. As we work through those 71 different insurers, unless we have electronic funds transferred, they send us a check. Well, the town of Brattleboro is 230 Main Street. Golden Cross is in Claremont, and if they just look at the biller and the payer, they send the check right now to the town of Brattleboro. That causes some challenges because then we have to make sure Golden Cross gets that record and then is able to attribute it. That is definitely a headache that I am experiencing right now. So Advil is welcomed, but we are working to get all those different insurance companies having EFT so the funds come directly to the bank. We don't have to worry about the depositing of the check, and all of that is electronically available to us. We just aren't there with those 71 different insurers yet. We're there with Medicaid in Vermont, which I think is a huge step. Medicare will be the next one. We are continually working on that.
Great. I really appreciate the questions. I appreciate the level of detail and the response. I have a lot of trust in our staff here and in our contracted staff as billers. And, I think it's important to recognize that this is a new project for the town. It was a controversial project, and we're working through it, and we're experiencing bumps. For folks that work in emergency management, I guess bumps are just part of the job, right? And if we're in a position exactly the same as where we are today, 1 quarter from now, I say that's a big problem, right? But we've asked for an update the minute that there's good news, or a month from now if there's no news, just so that we can kind of communicate that to the public. But I'm hopeful that we will be in a better place quite soon. So with that, I'd like to say thank you so much for your presentation and your detailed responses. And I'd like us to move on to the Finance Department's quarterly report.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good evening. I hope that the rest of your week is quiet. Thank you to the Fire Department for all of their work. Yeah, sorry. Okay, so Finance Department quarterly report, an update through FY25 quarter 2. And I didn't talk with John about who was presenting this. John, who's presenting this?
Patrick is going to present on this, but I'll just start out by saying that, we did the best we could pulling this together without a finance director. I think Patrick's done a great job of getting these reports put together and out, and he will address give you an overview of that. So,
great, thank you. Hi, Patrick.
Good evening. Good to see you. Good to be here. I just want to carry on a little bit about what John was just saying. Obviously, we're in between finance directors at the moment. Several of us have been sort of leaning in and trying to, provide some measure of leadership within the finance department. Certainly John Potter, myself, and also Sally Nix, our HR director, have all been doing a little bit of extra duty in this time in between finance directors. I miss Kim Frost. I wish she was here. I'll do the best I can to sort of walk through the finance report. And then before I conclude, there's a little something I'd like to talk about related to the conclusion of fiscal 24 and the recent audit that was put out. And I'll hit that at the end and then try and take some questions. So the financial statements that have been included in the select board backup, by the way, somehow I missed sending along the general fund. We corrected that as of yesterday. But my apologies for not having that over the weekend. So the financial statements that are before you are inclusive of about 50% of fiscal 25 from July 1 through December 31st. As presented, they encompass each of the town's three major operating funds, the general fund and each of the two enterprise funds, the utility fund and the parking fund. General fund, which is primarily of interest to most folks, is at this point in time about 55% of the way through its budget. But of course, so much of the payments that come out of the general fund are sort of front-ended for the year. So that would include things like insurance payments and human services funding. That all goes out the door in July. And so when you sort of prorate that over the year, we're really at about 49% at this moment in time when we are 50% through the year. I took a look through the general fund. I just have a couple of notes here, things I found a little interesting and might want to point out. On the revenue side, opioid settlement revenue is up. That's a little hard for us to predict for a variety of reasons. One of the reasons is that this is inclusive of multiple lawsuits. And so one of them we've had a settlement with for a couple of years now. They've provided us with a sort of roadmap of, this is what you should expect to see coming from us. But the other one settled more recently than that, and we didn't get such a roadmap. So revenue is just a little bit higher than we anticipated, and we'll have to see if we get clarity as to where that's going in the future years. For now, it's just a little extra revenue, and that's nice. The other thing I want to point out on the revenue side is the local option taxes, both the sales and use tax and the meals and room, appear to be right on target, where we've got 1 quarter's worth of revenue. We've had 1 quarter of payments from the state at this point in time for this fiscal year. So everything's trending pretty much exactly where we would expect it to be. I noted that EMS revenue is kind of limited for all the reasons that Superintendent Fritz indicated, but as each of those buckets, as he calls them, gets to be streamlined and our connection gets to be better established with each of those funding sources, we expect that to increase more in line with expectations shortly. On the expense side, in the general fund, it's sort of a common trend. Some of the larger public safety departments appear to be trending a little heavy on their budgets, whereas many of the administrative offices appear to be either on track or doing better than budget. Those are things that we, at a management level, are going to need to be paying close attention to. We have weekly discussions at our department head meetings, and we'll continue to do that to sort of track some of the expenditures and to do what we can to get expenses in line with the budget. Looking on to the utility funds, the utility fund is currently at 33%, actually at 31% after certain transactions that are front-ended are taken care of. One of the things I noted in reviewing the utility fund, expenses seem a little low. One of the things that I noted earlier today as I was going through that is depreciation hasn't been recorded, which is a fairly significant expense in the utility fund. I'm not sure whether that's something that should be recorded monthly or quarterly or annually. That's something I'm going to need to take a look at and make sure that we do appropriately. Thankfully, we've got a meeting coming up later in the week with our auditor, and I can get some good advice while we're there. But other than that, revenues seem to be tracking in the utility fund exactly as expected. And so I think we're doing okay there. In the parking fund, we're trending at about 31%. The thing that has me a little concerned with the parking fund is really not about the expenses, which, for example, haven't booked depreciation yet either, and also are down one staff member, so the expenses are a little on the low side. But the revenue doesn't appear to be in line with what I would expect for this time of year, particularly not so much in the area of permits or citations, but in the area of just what we've always called parking meter fees. And so I don't have a great answer for why that is, where it is, but it's something I'm going to take a close look at in the weeks to come to get a better sense as to what's going on there and see if there's adjustments of some kind that we need to do in light of the changes that have occurred in the parking fund. Along with the financial statements for these three funds, we have the traditional loan report, which shows a balance of a little over $4 million in loans from various loan programs the town operates. We've got the fund balance report that has fund balances for all the little funds as of 12/31, and of course the grant report, which contains 28 active grants and 11 grants currently in the application process. But the thing that I'd like to talk about for a moment, if that's all right with everybody, is fiscal 24. And in particular, the audit that was recently released about fiscal 24. Let me see if I can just move some of this out of the way. It seems to have raised a certain level of concern that I've been hearing about, and I don't think that concern is necessarily founded, and I'd like to explain why. I still, by the way, have some questions about our audit and look forward to our meeting with the auditor on Thursday. But there's a major point that I'd like to point out. For anybody in the audience, I've got some paper copies of this. It's on the screen, and I believe you should have a copy of that at the table. But what I'd like to show is the difference between what I've noted here as columns A, B, and C. Column A is the adopted budget for fiscal 24. This is the one, this is what was passed at RTM. Column C is the actual performance for that year. This is the actual performance, whether it comes out of OpenGov or whether it comes out of the audit. Comes to the same bottom line, deficit of little over 1.5 million. The concern that I hear from folks is comparing column C to column A. But I don't think that's the fair comparison. I don't think that's the correct comparison. I think the comparison needs to be between column C and column B. And I'd like to explain that a little bit. For the last, I don't know how many years, at least a dozen or so, we have incorporated a use of fund balance, when available, into the year's budget. But that use of fund balance is not a revenue. It's a use of our retained savings. It's a use of our, let's say, our bank account. Putting it somewhat simply, if we were to pass a budget with $10 in expenses and $9 in revenue, planning to use $1 out of our back pocket is what we've been doing in the general fund for many, many years. And so while we show it in the budget discussions as a revenue, it's not a revenue. It is a use of fund balance. It's the difference between a plan, which is column A, and accounting, which is column B, in that we don't actually expect to receive fund balance as a source of outside revenue. That's a consumption of our retained surplus or savings or earnings, something along those lines. The same thing is really largely true with the employee contributions. We don't receive checks as revenue from employees. Instead, that gets deducted off the expense inside the expenses of the budget. So when you take a look at fiscal 24 as planned, we planned on a $20.8 million in revenue and $22 million in expenses. When you compare that with column C, the difference is not nearly as much, okay? There's still a difference, and I'd like to speak to that for a moment as well. But it's a little less than, or it's about 300,000, it looks like. Within that difference, one portion of that is based on expenses, that being 76,000. We overspent by 76,000. This was in a year when, for example, we had an unbudgeted expense of over 80,000 for private security. Wish we could have caught that. Wish we could have managed that a little better. We went over by 76,000. That's just clear. But the vast majority of the difference between fiscal 24 as planned and fiscal 24 as recorded is on the revenue side, of which there's a smattering of revenue, about 63,000, which is a little bit from all over the place. Town clerk fees were a little less than we anticipated, or it's a little up and down all over the place. That's something I think we should correct at a budgeting level, and as much as anything. But the largest single, the largest single variance between what we planned to happen in fiscal 24 and the actual of fiscal 24 is in property tax revenue. And what's really interesting about that, believe it or not, is just how complicated that is. My first reaction, John Potter's first reaction as well, that, why would we have less property tax revenue? Well, what I can say is it's complicated. It involves things like the amount of money that we raise for the schools. And it also involves individual property owners in town that perhaps filed their homestead declaration late, after we had already set the tax rates, and now the state changes what their property tax should be based on a late filing of a homestead application, which then alters how much money we need to send to the schools, altering for us how much is retained by the town. Should it be that complicated? No, or at least it doesn't feel like it should be. But it is that complicated. The other thing that's impacting that particular number as well is that fiscal 24 is the very first year that I know of ever where we haven't conducted a tax sale. In every prior year, at the conclusion of the fourth payment, somebody who is not current with their taxes becomes delinquent. That list in May can be pretty long. It can be 100 property owners. But through the process of conducting a tax sale, most folks bring themselves into current good standing with the finance department. So much so that in the last year that we had a tax sale, by the time the tax sale came around, there wasn't anybody left. The tax sale itself was canceled because everybody had, in effect, paid up. That hasn't happened in this particular year due to legislation that occurred up in Montpelier that delays the process by 1 year. So to what degree does that variance result from the tax sale process? I don't know, but some portion of it certainly does. To what degree is that number related to late filings for a homestead declaration across many properties in town? I don't know, but it's some significant portion. Those are things that are largely outside of our control, but something that we are subject to and impacted by. So, in a nutshell, what I'm trying to point out here is simply this. We anticipated a $1.2 million deficit in that particular year. If you had asked on July 1, are we going to finish this year with a deficit? I'd say almost certainly. It's a little larger than we had anticipated, not really on the expense side, mostly on the revenue side. And so that's just something I thought we should get on the table. Just given the level of concern and anxiety that I've heard about, my goodness, we ran a deficit. So.
Thank you. Well, Patrick, thank you so much for that presentation. I'm kind of in awe of expertise in this regard. And, you know, the select board is certainly, you know, expected to be, you know, conversant in, you know, financial matters, but I don't think we'd ever quite reach that level of detail. And so I appreciate it, and I'm glad that you are speaking about it, and I'm sure that folks have questions. So let's hear them. Franz?
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you, Daniel. So I'm looking at the first page of the memorandum, and the utilities fund and the parking fund sections, which are enterprise funds, and I don't remember the budgets that we adopted in enough detail to know that the total revenue and total expenses should be about the same because they're enterprise funds. I mean, we certainly talked about that quite a bit and adjusted some charges in various ways to reach a balance where we weren't subsidizing these funds from the general fund. So I don't know the exact numbers, but I expect the revenues and expenses to be roughly equal. But I'm just looking at this now, and you know, if we go to the utilities fund, the utility fund expenditures are 31% of the annual budget, adjusted appropriately. But the total revenues are less than that, meaning that they're, you know, less than 30%. Mm-hmm. And I don't get why our revenues in the utilities fund would be so low. And you see the same thing in the parking fund, except maybe even a little bit more exaggerated. So what's going on with the revenues there? I guess that's my question.
So the utility fund, I'm sorry,
No, you could go right ahead.
The utility fund is far more predictable than the parking fund. So we send out 4 quarterly bills. Water and sewer bills are paid on a quarterly basis. The first billing goes out in July, but that's not actually for this year. That's for the 4th quarter of the previous year. So we only have 1 quarter's worth of revenue so far in the utility fund, and that's perfectly normal for this time of year. So that is to be expected. Also, in the utility fund, we don't always provide a balanced budget. Sometimes, we show a deficit. Sometimes we show a surplus in the planning. The ultimate objective, I would suggest, is largely based on what those gentlemen talked about earlier today. What is our sort of rolling capital balance? What is our operational balance? Do we have enough resources on hand today and in future years to meet our operational and capital needs? I am tickled completely that we brought in some experts. I know, I think I started this by saying I'm not a finance director. I probably shouldn't be spending as much time looking at what our utility rates ought to be. I'm really glad we've brought in some experts, and I'm feeling really good about the consequences there. because, are rates too high? Are they too low? Let's get some real professional advice and see what they suggest. The parking fund also, I don't remember, the exact budget we passed, but I do believe we passed a deficit budget there as well. I think it probably wasn't planned that way to begin with, but I do recall that we spent at least 3 months waiting for the ordinance to take shape before we adjusted rates. And then we were a little delayed in making the improvements, so those rates didn't go into effect until later in the year. Still, with all that said, the revenue in the parking fund isn't meeting expectation, and I'm curious as to why. I don't have the answer for you today, but I'm going to chase that down, and we'll see what we can find out.
Thanks, Patrick. Both of those budgets were passed with deficits. I think we passed them. Richard.
So I'm just curious, don't you think that the transition to a new system might have caused us to take a hit on the parking revenue?
It's possible. Yeah, it's certainly possible. But I still see people downtown all over the place. And I don't see empty parking lots. So, what's going on?
And so that's something that we'll kind of look into over the next quarter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. And, at what point does it become a massive problem? We're at the end of quarter 2. By quarter 3, we'll probably understand it better.
Yep.
Quarter 4 starts to be iffy if we're way off our budget.
Yeah. We benefit in strange ways from these being managed as an enterprise fund. One of which is, while we need to record depreciation, it's not really an expense, right? We don't write a check to anybody for depreciation. So while you can conclude a year in the parking fund with a deficit, it doesn't necessarily erode your cash. It depends on how much of a deficit, obviously. So it's something we need to pay closer attention to. And with finance director out, it's something JP and I and Sally are going to be paying closer attention to in the future. And so I hope to have more response.
Raising my hand to myself. Okay,
Yes.
Daniel, you're recognized. We don't have a finance director. The last time we didn't have a finance director, we employed a contractor, not to provide exactly the same level of service, but yes, but to provide some oversight and not to burden the town manager's office as much as it's currently doing. Is that something that you guys are considering right now?
Yeah, we've talked about it, and we'll continue to explore that. We'd have to use the vacancy savings to do something like that. But, yeah, it is something that we have discussed. We are looking into that. It is something we would have to use the vacancy savings to pay for it. So we'll be exploring that. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously there's pros and cons. Certainly, if the town manager's office is having to expend a great deal of energy in this direction, it means other things are, not able to receive as much attention as they need to. We have a lot of things going on always, and I know that there are a number of emergent things that you guys are working on right now. And so, is there a board policy decision around this, or is that just a purely town manager hiring kind of decision? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Who else has questions? Okay.
Not me. Thank you for your expertise.
Yeah, that's appreciated. Okay, let's hear from the public. Mr. DeGray, then Ms. O'Connor. Oh, actually, you know what? David, it's cheating on Zoom, because when you stick your hand up on Zoom, you don't have to do anything. You just sit there. You can't just stick your hand up like that the whole time. But we will recognize David, first of all, because he was...
We're on to David?
He stuck his hand up, I think, before we even started the presentation.
Thank you. I actually have been sitting here a long time. I'm sorry, David Leffenbach, District 9. And I've been sitting here a long time. I wish I was actually standing for a couple of minutes. But, and I appreciate very much the sort of preview that Mr. Moreland gave on the question of the audit. I don't pretend to understand exactly all of what he was doing. But I'm sure that I can go back and look at the video and watch it 6 or 7 times, and maybe it'll enter my thick skull. But the one point I did want to make was that he made the observation that there were things that were outside the town's control, which I certainly understand. But in that context, that argues for making sure that our fund balance is in good shape and is not worn down unnecessarily. And that was the simple observation I was going to make. And I do thank Mr. Moreland for what he was doing. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, David. Dick, then Kate.
I remember several months ago when you decided not to do monthly reviews of the finances. I really asked you to continue that because I think it's a real important part of your responsibility to the taxpayers. So I didn't get this report when I looked at it. When I looked at the materials on Friday, I noticed right away that the town portion of the quarterly report wasn't here, and actually up until I got here tonight when Kate said, oh, it's been put up on the webpage. So I went, and if you look at tax revenue,
would you like to give us a page number? No.
I've got to make sure I'm on the right. Let's see, it would be the first page right at the top.
43.
Is it? It is 1 of 20.
Yeah.
And so if you look at current taxes, it's $17,701, or $701,970.
Oh, oops.
And if you look over in the actual, it says we've already taken in $17,472,611. And we still have 2 collections left, one in a week and one in May. And so we're really going to be over if this number is correct, which it's not.
Do you have other questions? Because I got an immediate reaction to that based on asking that same question over the years.
So then I went to, they were talking about the audit, and I know you don't have this in front of you, I do. And if you look on page 47 when you get home on the audit report, Patrick talked about $80,000 over because we were paying for security. Well, in the revenue side, we were $1.5 million short, and Patrick talked about that. And then we were $76,000 over, but every department had overexpended their line item, except Public Works, who was under by $200,000, which actually saved the town. Now, I know that the word was out back in May to control your spending because it looked like we were in financial trouble. And if you went to the last time that you, as a board, I believe in 2024, was April 26th, you had a financial report. And if you looked at that report close enough, you would have seen that the revenue number and the expenditure number were both the same. Statistically impossible, but it was right there on the paper, and nobody picked it up. And actually, the numbers that were there were higher than what's here in the audit. So I think it's really important for you as a board, because you talked about it with fire with their financial report, which is a huge concern and should be, that you guys get back on and start looking at the monthly reports to look and make sure that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed with the finances.
Okay.
And I didn't get to go through all of this, but I see a couple of areas that I'm not going to mention.
Great, thanks. I think I would have, so this is just my opinion. I'm not sure what the other board members think yet, but like, if we had a finance director working in the town right now, I might be more inclined to say, yes, let's have a monthly finance report. I know that the burden of like getting the report together, I mean, it's important that you guys are having oversight of our finances at the high level. But, you know, you are already burdened in many ways. And I think that continuing to do a quarterly report until we have steady leadership in the finance department is a more reasonable thing to ask. But my fellow board members want to disagree?
I would not disagree.
I would not disagree.
Okay. Anyone else got any thoughts on that? I see you. Let's hear from the board for a little minute.
So what are you proposing when we do get a finance director?
You know, if I'm still on the board when we get a finance director, I'll be pleasantly surprised. So I think you take it up with the new
I'm
board.
asking you to think about it, though.
Yeah.
I mean, is your statement that if we do get a finance director, we should go back to monthly reports? I mean, I don't know what I think about it.
Right. Okay.
I think if what Daniel's saying is that until we determine when we can get a finance director, and then if we can determine that it is feasibly responsible to do that, then we will work towards that.
Yeah.
If I'm reading between.
Sure. I mean, so when we used to have a monthly finance report, there were very few times where the board had much to say. I was one of the people that would at least come up with 3 or 4 things. You know, we were looking at line item detail. We were saying, hey, what's up with this line? And somebody would say, that's what's up with this line. And then we'd go, okay, cool. Thanks for letting us know. Now, that's maybe the Daniel Quip approach. Maybe the Dick DeGray approach would be different. Maybe the Kate O'Connor approach would be different. You know, in my experience sitting on this board for the last 6 years, a monthly report has usually been a pretty uneventful affair. And I think that when John joined us, you felt that a quarterly report was more useful. You argued that it was a better way to track trends. We had a pretty new finance director at that time. I forget the timeline here, but, you know, we gave that a try. I think some of the critique is fair. I think that by having a quarterly report, if things are not going quite so well, then we're vulnerable to being like, wait, what happened? You know, that's fair.
I also, if I can interject, I also sort of remember a mechanism of saying, so quarterly is acceptable, but if something's going down, you're going to let us know.
Yeah, I kind of remember that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I don't know. I mean, I think like, I wouldn't have any huge problem with a monthly report. I think if I'm being very candid, you know, John as a new town manager is coming in and saying, hey, I'd like to try it this way. And I want to give John the leeway to like try some things rather than be like, nope, got to do it the old way. So that's where I was at.
Appreciate that. I mean, the thought process was to have the board operating more at a policy level as opposed to micromanaging what's going on in terms of the nuts and bolts all the time.
Right.
If that's not what the board wants, then we can look at other ways to do it. There's a cost to that. It takes a lot of time to pull information like this together, and if you're not making a policy decision based on that, then it's kind of a waste of time, really.
Right.
But if it would reassure you or, you know, have some other benefit, then we're happy to do whatever you want.
Right.
So,
I mean, I think that reassurance does have a value. I actually think a lot of what has happened this evening is about communicating what's going on. There were no policy decisions tonight, but communicating what's going on with the public, having the public ask questions, Bob had a very weedsy question about EMS revenue. Nobody on the select board would have been well placed to answer that question. But our professional staff, who are actually working on this stuff every day, lo and behold, had something to say. And that sort of same regard for professional staff working here every day goes back to the budget as well, because I know that the department heads are monitoring their budgets, right? So, how much of the board wants to have, like, oversight for, I don't know, I'm going to stop talking. Liz?
Let's keep it a quarterly, and when we get a new finance director, we'll decide.
Okay. Peter? What she said. Okay.
You.
All right.
I see what you did there.
So unless there's any kind of opposition to that, I think we'll stick with
No,
what
I was
we're
really
doing.
just wondering what you really thought, and you just told us. So
Yeah, I
thank
told you what I really thought. Yeah, how about that? John?
I will suggest, like I did make a note when Patrick was talking about the parking revenues and that he would be looking into that. I mean, I think that's the kind of thing that could come up in a quarterly report like this, or the EMS revenues.
Right.
Similarly, I made a note there. And like those are kind of flags that maybe we could come back to more like in a month or 2 months, something like that.
Right.
When we have more information that would be helpful to reassure you. But
I think that would be helpful.
I agree with that. I mean, there's this little anomaly here, and I think it's good that we sort of keep our finger on the pulse of that. So,
Yeah. I think there's also like something to be said about the rollout of our OpenGov finance software and how that didn't quite play out as we envisaged. And so, you see, for those of us who've been looking at this for a long time, the way that the material's presented now is different than how it used to be presented. My assumption is, from working with data systems myself, is that it's probably easier to produce these reports than it used to be to produce our old financial data. I don't know, Patrick, you said it was like 8 million spreadsheets, right?
I love me a spreadsheet.
Yeah, me too.
Daniel has them right on his phone. He can show you in a moment's notice.
But like, is it fair to say that it is fairly easy to just kind of produce a report of the general fund?
Is. No,
it's the analysis.
OpenGov is a change to kind of the way we do business in an interesting way. I can't tell you for how many years. Every Wednesday, I think most of you know, we have a department head meeting. Along with that would be every remote department hand delivering stacks of paper to this location, none of which is necessary any longer, and all of which can be done online. And so in a world where we may find ourselves needing to bug out in a way that we did in 2020, having an online tool that you can access from anywhere and log into without having to set up special VPNs and all sorts of things. There's just a number of ways in which OpenGov is modernizing how we manage data, financial data. It's never super enjoyable to learn a new system, but once you get yourself going, it's like a bicycle. You ride it.
Okay, let's hear from Kate.
Kate O'Connor, Brattleboro. We've gone down I have a question, but now I want to comment on all this new stuff as I've been sitting here. I think the audit is the reason you need to look at the financial information monthly. I'm concerned about one of the concerns Patrick talked about, but to me, the auditor found 2 significant deficiencies, which I won't go through right now. I'm sure you guys have looked at them. The effects of those deficiencies was a problem with oversight and management of the town's finances. The results of those deficiencies, per what the auditor said, was our financial statements for FY24 were not correct. That's a big problem, that the financial reports for FY24 were not correct. That's what the auditor's report says. To me, that's why you as the people that are supposed to, taking care of our financials, looking over, it's your fiduciary responsibility to know what's going on with the town finances. So I think you have to see them monthly. And if you don't want to see them monthly, if we have OpenGov, can you push the button, run the report, and include it with the monthly reports that every department does in the select board backup material? We see all the warrants. If you don't want to look at them, you don't have to. But if you folks could push the button once a month, put it in the backup material, and if you guys want to close your eyes and not look at them, don't, but allow the public to see it. Because I really think that's important. And I also think it's important based on, how I feel about the budget you folks just passed. I think it's more important now than ever, based on that budget and based on that audit, that at least the public can pay attention monthly to the finances. So that's my speech on that.
Okay. Can I respond to some of that?
Oh, yeah.
Well, can we respond to some of that? So I think that request for can you publish the general fund and, utility and parking fund reports monthly as part of the material, I think that's reasonable. If it genuinely is easy to publish, what we're saying is we're not going to ask staff to devote time in preparing a memo and come ready to talk about it. It's not going to be on the agenda every month, which is a compromise. I also, I do remember the idea that we should be, I was just about to try and do it, we should be able to go on to the town website and look at the current budget and see current financial information that's about as up to date as it can be. And that's still not possible, right?
That is correct.
But will it become possible?
I honestly don't know at this moment in time. I know it was part of the discussion when we were sort of courting OpenGov. I need to sort of pick up where that conversation left off publicly because, frankly, on that particular issue, I wasn't very directly involved. I understand there's been some challenges having to do with some changes within OpenGov, but JP and I were talking about that just earlier today, and we're going to set up a meeting and see where, if that's possible and can we roll it out.
Okay.
Because we were actually.
But I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry.
I didn't quite finish. But if you said, hey, put these out monthly, that's an easy do.
Okay, that's what I would prefer. I feel like that's a reasonable compromise. I'm seeing 2 nods over here and a raised hand and a bit of assent over there. Okay, sounds like that's what I'll have.
Thank you on that.
Okay.
Now I just have one quick question.
Can I ask though about, audits are complicated and they happen very much after the fact, right? It's like, you'll see what really did happen. And so my question is, the financial report that we looked at last, when that fiscal year ended, would it have flagged for us the problem that the audit then found later on? I don't know. I mean, I was here and
I don't think
Are you
they'll
talking
know
about
that
from-
until they meet with the auditor.
I'm
so
a little hearing challenged, but if the question is, the last time we had a financial report was, I believe, in August, and these numbers are materially the same as they were then.
Right, and Kate's talking about FY24. So
so am I, actually.
Yeah, right. And so, I guess what you're saying is, you guys should have seen it. And I'm saying, I sat here and read those reports and didn't. So maybe it's on me. Maybe I failed to understand something. But maybe it's also there's the process of auditing afterwards that uncovers some things that weren't quite apparent. Maybe. I don't know. John's got some thoughts.
Yeah, no, I think you're pretty accurate on that. The numbers that the finance director reported in August to you are materially the same as what's in the audit. Didn't change a little bit. There was some ups and downs because things land after the fact, or she accounts for things differently than we reported on. If the question is, would we have known like last spring what these things that Patrick pointed out? No, we wouldn't have been able to see them. We would not have been able to change anything other than what we did, which was we knew we were going to be very close on the budget. And so we slammed on the brakes. As Dick DeGray pointed out, a lot of that savings ended up being in DPW because that's what was left that we could do anything about. So we ended up doing less road work and other things than we would have liked to, but we wanted to hit that budget, and we ended up being within 0.33% of the budget, but within $74,000, which is a rounding error on a $25 million budget. I think we did really well, particularly with the additional unbudgeted expense of the security services that we were trying to cover in that cycle. So
okay.
I just want to say, we're discussing the audit. We're not going to really be discussing the audit until our next meeting,
Right.
after which time Patrick and John will have met with the auditor. Right now, we're speculating as to what the concern is. We have some ideas. We've posited them for the public. Let's wait and see what the fruit of that discussion is before we make, before we damn us all and we blame us all for what we don't know to be the truth.
Okay, great.
I just want
Other
you folks to
questions?
know that I'm going to send you a newspaper article about what happened in the town of Brattleboro between 2006 and 2011. And I really hope that you will read it and you will understand the concern that me and other citizens of the town have. So I'm going to send that to everybody. My question is page 2 of the general fund line item. And it's line 45169 EMS reimbursement. And it says that between July 1st and December 31st, we've taken in $299,000. We just heard from the fire department that we've only taken in $91,000. So I'm wondering if that $299,000 includes the $250,000 out of what was formerly known as ARPA money. So this is actually, it's not ARPA money anymore, it's special projects money that came from the taxpayers. So does that $299,000 include $250,000 of taxpayer dollars?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
John, you're saying yes?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. That framing of it being taxpayer dollars, I don't know.
No, it's not. It was special projects revenue. So that the board had planned to transfer.
We sort of said this is going to be used for this, and this.
Yes, because we knew that we were a startup. This is a startup business, and we didn't have revenues to cover it in the first quarter, and those would likely come in the next quarter after this fiscal year. So.
Okay. All right. Dick.
So going back to monthly reports, like earlier this evening, and I know you would ask questions, and not everybody on the boards that I served with didn't ask questions, but there were certainly people who did. And so when I asked the chief, when you look through this budget, they're over their line item for overtime at 6 months into the year. So if you were getting a monthly report, somebody might go, hey, what's going on that you're going over your line item or close to going over this early on? And so you're picking that up. That's what the questions are, to inform you.
Yes,
and so
I agree.
here's
And the fire department and the town manager's office are asking that question every single month.
And so, but are you getting the update? Because you guys are the ones responsible. And so I come to I've been to just about every meeting in the last couple of years, and I don't hear the administration going, hey, we're really down in EMS collections. I've never heard that publicly. Maybe you have heard it in your committee meetings, but that's something that I think would be information to the public. So here's a question here. Department head salary for the fire chief. It is a
Could you tell us which page, Dick?
let's see, it is page 11 of 20.
Thanks.
And he left after 6 months, and he has been paid, and I'm thinking this is all going to him, so you can clarify this, $96,136.13. And so that looks like almost 3/4 of the year and not 50% of the year, which he worked.
Okay, Patrick has got an answer for you.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. What's going on there? Len Howard was an employee of the town for 37 years, I think, was stated earlier today. That's not just his salary, that's also the payout of all of his accrued vacation time, earned sick time, and other things like that. There is a line, a couple of lines down from department head salary called vacation buyback retiree pay, I think it's called. In my judgment, that payout would better be situated there rather than in staff salary. Because when those things do occur, questions like this kind of come up. Just a thought.
Great.
But excuse me, Patrick, if I can push back just a little bit.
Sure.
That line item says $10,750, and there has been no money expended.
Right. Because I'm saying there's an expense that, in my judgment, would more properly go to that retiree payout line, but it's been incorporated into the department head salary.
Then why isn't there a reduction in that line item for money that went up there?
I don't
There should be some
understand your
sort.
question.
Well, if you have that line item, vacation buyback,
Yeah,
it's $10,000.
yeah.
If he was going to get some of that money,
No.
what am I missing?
So that's how much was budgeted for vacation buyback. We
Right.
didn't know that Len would be leaving in that period of time.
Right.
That kind of thing happens to us a lot. If you look back to, who's the last long-time department head who left? When Steve Barrett left,
Yeah.
he had a nice big payout on the way out the door, which was, all of his accrued vacation, all of his, this, that, and the other. That got accounted for in the department head salary line when it should probably, at least in my judgment, have been put in the vacation buyback retiree pay, which would lower what is shown in the department head, but far exceed what was budgeted because we didn't know Len was leaving.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So it's coming up to 10 o'clock. I think we need to be wrapping up. We've gone a couple hours past, well, maybe not a couple hours, hour and a half past where we thought we might be at the end. I think it's been a really good discussion, and I'm really grateful for all of the people that have been involved in it, staff members and members of the public alike. So with that, I will look for one final motion. Elizabeth.
I move to adjourn.
Okay, Elizabeth made a motion to adjourn. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 5-0. We're adjourned. Thank you, interpreters. Thank you to BCTV. Thank you to staff. Thank you to the public, and good evening.